Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, children of all ages, it's that time of the week, that time of the night, time to get started.
Is your bar looking a little ordinary? Is it lacking something awesome? Well, head out to your local liquor store and pick up something extraordinary. Grab a bottle of Old Humble Straight Whiskey or Old Humble Special Reserve. They're clean, smooth, easy drinking whiskeys that taste the way whiskey should taste. From humble beginnings to an extraordinary finish, Old Humble whiskeys are what your bar needs today. Walk tall, be awesome, and drink humble. Old Humble Straight Whiskey and Old Humble Special Reserve. Get yours today.
And we're here. It's time for the show, guys, gals, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, dickheads and dick shafts. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you want to non-gender whatever groups of people. However you choose to do it. I'm your host, the Old Humble Guy, and it is Whiskey Giveaway Night. Check that out, Whiskey Giveaway Night. We have topped 550. We have been a top 550 for about a month now, and we are now marching happily towards 600. I have a big show planned for number 600. We're going to do our 600 subscriber special right around July 4th. It's going to be dope as hell and crazy insane. It will be 600 fireworks going off, being absolutely awesome. It's going to light up the sky, loud as hell. It's going to go for like 4 hours. No, I don't know how long it's going to go, but it'll be 600 fireworks. It's going to be cool. It's going to be absolutely cool. Over there in our shop, the little shop in the woods. So tonight is our whiskey giveaway night. What are we giving away, you ask? Well, I'm happy to tell you what we're giving away. But first, I'm going to pour myself my shot, my opening shot. We'll go over here to my roll top desk. And here in my roll top desk, we'll grab a special reserve. Yeah, I'm making the special reserve at the shop right now. So we'll have a little of the special reserve tonight. I'm not going to drink the whole shot because it's going to be a long night. I'm just going to have a sip. And I'm going to enjoy it for pretty much a good portion of the evening. Got all my stuff here on my desk. I need to move it around. Car keys, wallet, all that stuff. Go over there. Cheers to all y'all. May the odds ever be in your favor. So what are we doing? What are we giving away? What are we giving away? Right here. This beautiful box. What's in the box? Well, I'll tell you what's in the box. The first ever Old Humble Distilling Company sample flight. In this box, we have, if I can open it with my clumsy fingernails, we have 3 delicious whiskeys, our straight whiskey, our special reserve, and our double oak rye, and a little something about all 3. Here, right here. A little note from me to let you know what it is you're drinking. And I'm very, very happy to announce our double oak rye has been awarded a silver medal along with our special reserve. Our double oak rye and special reserve have both been awarded silver medals in the New York International Spirits Competition. That news just came out yesterday. So you will be able to sample our delicious silver medal winning double oak rye and special reserve. Our straight whiskey also won a bronze medal at this particular competition. The second time it's won a bronze medal at the New York International Spirits Competition. But it's the first time it has appeared with its sisters. Oh, and what's this? This is a Alec Bradley cigar that is joining the whiskeys. It is a fine cigar, Not the best I've ever had, but it is a fine cigar. If they want to sponsor me and send me a pack of smokes, a pack of cigars, it will then be the best that I've ever had. No, I'm kidding. It's a delightful cigar. It's very enjoyable. It goes well with the whiskeys. That's why I packed it in the box with your sample flight of whiskey, so you can enjoy it at your leisure. If you're not a cigar person, that's fine. Don't enjoy it. I'm not forcing you to. I'm not going to make you. But after, let's see here, about 10:45 and about 37 minutes, we will spin the wheel of doom and glory. The source of your doom or glory. This wheel will. This wheel will This wheel will get. I don't know what I was doing. It will give you a monumental sense of doom or glory. I'm going to have to fix that because I can't put up with that. Let me see if I can fix it. This wheel will grant a monumental sense of joy or despair, which is pretty much what doom and glory is. So there you go. That is what we will be spinning in a little while. And the names on the, if you look at the list of names on the wheel, you can see how many slices are on the wheel. There are 83 entries on the wheel. They have been randomized so that, they're not in order of appearance. They're not in order of awarding, I guess is the word. They are in random orders. So there you go. And everybody over the last 2-3 weeks who have been in trivia, who've gotten in chat during our live shows, who've participated in the productions, they have gotten on there every single time. You've gotten in chat, you've won in trivia, you've done anything, interacted with us since about 2 weeks ago. So about 6 shows worth. We're going to do the same thing probably in September. So all of August, let's see here. Yeah, for pretty much all of August, you'll have a chance to get your name on the next wheel in September, and we'll give away something else. I don't know what it'll be. Maybe it'll be another box. Maybe it'll be another flight of samples. Maybe it'll be a different flight of samples. I don't know. We'll find out. Having some render problems here, but we'll fix that. Next week, let's see. No, tomorrow night we've got trivia. Then Friday night we've got live music. And then after trivia and live music Friday night, there's a real good chance that tomorrow afternoon I'll also be doing another day in the life behind the scenes, bottling up the special reserve that I proofed out today. And then next week I will post up a video of our quest for 100,000 views. If you have any interest in the metrics of YouTube and the algorithms of YouTube, hello Vanessa Kitty, cheers to chat. If you have any interest in the metrics and behind the scenes algorithms, the underlying stuff of how you build a channel and what you do to build a channel, I'm doing this quest in the open, in public, and I can tell you this much. May was a fantastic month. It was a great month. I tapped into the secret sauce of shorts. People have been consuming my shorts at a prodigious pace. So it's been a very interesting month. It's been a very good month. And now it's time to turn the screws one more time as we march on to 600 viewers or 600 subscribers and really start working on the next metrics of the channel, not just views, but now subscriber or hours and subscribers, which kind of flow from views. And we'll work on that. That's what we'll be talking about in episode 11 next week. So if you have any interest in that whatsoever, pay attention, stay tuned, stay close, whatever. And then I'm going to start recording a whiskey making process video where we walk through the process of making it from grain all the way to your glass. But that's going to take several months to record because we don't do the whole process all at once. There's parts of the process that are getting strung out. So there you go. And with no further ado, let's talk about the Whiskey Rebellion, shall we? Whiskey Rebellion was a very hang on, let me give it like 2 seconds. The Whiskey Rebellion. 5, 4. The Whiskey Rebellion was this fascinating little moment in American history. Uh, the American Constitution was just ratified in 1788. George Washington had just started his first term in office in April of 1789. And damn if 2 years later, 1791, this Whiskey Rebellion breaks out. What was the Whiskey Rebellion? 2 years into the existence of the United States, what is this Whiskey Rebellion? Well, the United States had just finished the Revolutionary War. We had Revolutionary War debt. Hamilton was our Secretary of Treasury, I believe. I think so. And he thought they had raised the taxes high enough on imports, so they needed more revenue. So the revenue that they sought after was this excise tax on liquor production and liquor sales, but not just liquor. It wasn't just liquor sales; it was liquor production. So they added this excise tax, and he thought, for the most part, it would be popular because it was a sin tax, because it was, on liquor. But the problem that they immediately ran into was that Western distillers, Western farmers, and by Western, I mean the Appalachian Mountains at this point, they didn't want to pay this tax. And one of the reasons why they didn't want to pay this tax is because they didn't feel like they were being serviced by the federal government very well. They didn't feel like they were being represented by the federal government very well. And they were still embroiled in Northwest Indian Wars. Northwest Indian Wars at the time, where we're talking like Northwest United States, so we're talking basically Ohio River Valley, south of the Great Lakes, Western Pennsylvania, Appalachian Mountains, all through there. The farmers were not allowed to use the Mississippi River for commerce because Spain owned the Louisiana Purchase, and they had shut out American farmers from using the Mississippi River. And this whiskey tax, it was the same tax for small distillers in the West as it was for large distillers in the East. And remember, big distilleries were still in the East at this point, East being New York, New Jersey, the major urban areas over on the East Coast. There were no major large distilleries in the West because there was no major anything in the West. Everything was still, the West. Still, we're talking Kentucky is the West, and Kentucky was not a state yet. It was a frontier territory. Okay, so like think of the time and space that we're working in here, and the excise tax was levied at either a per gallon basis or a flat annual rate basis. And if you produced enough, the annual rate is what you could pay, and that would basically reduce the tax per bottle or per barrel down to almost nothing. The more you produced, the less the tax was per barrel. Small distillers couldn't do that because the small distillers basically in the West were basically farmers that operated a still, and they would instead of transporting their grains, they would turn their grains into whiskey because it was easier to transport. You could transport a barrel of whiskey much easier than a cart of grain. So they would convert their grains into whiskey so that they could be transported east to the markets. But the transportation costs, the excise tax, and the fact that they were not producing in giant quantities made the whole operation less profitable and barely profitable enough. They were basically able to make more money off the grains than they were off the liquor. So they were seeing it as basically trying to put them out of business in the West as a protection to the people in the East. That's not exactly what the intent was, but that was the function of it, and it pissed these guys off. Net result, all up and down Appalachia, from Georgia all the way up to Western Pennsylvania, these farmers said, screw you, we're not paying. Which, for the federal government, obviously, was a problem. You have a whole bunch of farmers going all up and down the length of your country refusing to pay their taxes. You end up with a problem. And what ultimately ended up happening, 1791, it started off as just nobody paying taxes. Or nobody paying the excise tax. Nobody paying the excise tax. There were a bunch of distillers in Kentucky that were dragged into court to force them to pay taxes in 1792, but the taxes were deemed to be unrecoverable and the distillers were basically untaxable, which means they were either so poor that they didn't have any money, they were smart enough to be able to hide their money so nobody could find it, or they were just savvy enough to be able to avoid the revenuers so that the revenuers couldn't actually force them to pay. Some combination of all three of those is the likely culprit for the frontier distilleries in Kentucky, but all the way up and down the Appalachians, from Georgia all the way up to Western Pennsylvania. Western Pennsylvania was where it was most embarrassing for the federal government because the federal government was at this time based in Philadelphia in eastern Pennsylvania. So you have Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and basically the western counties in Pittsburgh were in open defiance. Not quite rebellion or revolt yet, but certainly in open defiance. Yes, 1792 bourbon. That is a very important year with regards to the Whiskey Rebellion. Now, when I was a kid in high school and we learned about the Whiskey Rebellion, it was like one paragraph. Like there was a Whiskey Rebellion, George Washington led troops, went into Western or went to the farmers and put down the rebellion. That's basically it. I was under the impression for most of my life that the Whiskey Rebellion was like in upstate New York. But no, it was in Western Pennsylvania. The actual rebellion part was in Western Pennsylvania. And here's where it starts to get interesting. After 1792, going into 1793, they're still not paying their taxes. They have a convention in Pittsburgh for the distillers and the farmers deciding what to do about this stupid tax. 1791, 1792, they have a convention in 1791, they have a convention in 1792. They're getting a little bit more hostile to it because the feds are getting a little bit more irritated and aggravated. Things escalate a little bit more in 1793 when they start attacking the revenuers. When the tax officials become a little bit more aggressive in their attempts to collect the taxes. The residents, the farmers, get a little bit more aggressive in their refusal to pay, and they're tarring and feathering tax officials. They're cornering them, hunting them down, and forcing them to give up their commission so that they can't collect taxes anymore. They're surrounding their homes and threatening to burn down their homes so that these guys have to disguise themselves as slaves and sneak out the back and flee the town so that they can get out alive. These guys, they're getting aggressive in their harassment, but they're not quite in open revolt yet. But then you get into 1794. In 1794, there's this cat, Neville, General Neville. He decides he's going to get these damn taxes collected, especially in Western Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania is where the federal capital is located, right? So he goes out to Western Pennsylvania. He starts delivering writs of appearance to, keyword is yet, right? He starts delivering these writs of appearance, these basically subpoenas to the farmers. His goal is to deliver like 70 of them, and he delivers most of them. And these subpoenas are for them to appear in court, to come before the magistrates, before the judges, and pay their fucking taxes, right? The intent of this was to enforce not so much have them appear in court, but to just have them write the damn check, pay your taxes, right? So he delivers most of them successfully. Most of them get delivered successfully, except for one where there's warning shots fired at him. He fires warning shots back. They fire warning shots back, and at this point, things are extremely tense. And there's a lot of historical discussion about this, about the timing of these writs, because these writs were basically handed out like a month before, excuse me, a month before the laws were relaxed a little bit, so that they didn't have to appear in court in Philadelphia. They could have appeared in court in Pittsburgh, which was a lot closer. and very likely would have had a much more friendly court, a much more friendly judge, a much more friendly jury. But the historical discussion is about whether or not they were trying to bring things to a head to get this resolved. Because there was a lot of discussion about using force in 1791, 1792, but there wasn't enough justification for use of military force, calling up militias and using military force yet. These writs go out, inflame tensions. They have another Congress to decide what to do. The moderates are pushed out. The extremists are there, and they say, we're not putting up with this shit anymore. So, fast forward to April 1793, to the Battle of, this is what brings everything to a head. The only, real confrontation of this whole situation was the Battle of Bowery Hill. And I think I said that right. I'm checking my notes right. The Battle of Bower Hill. So what happens is this revenuer dude, this tax collector, he's in his house. He's got 10 soldiers who've come over from Philadelphia to help protect him, and this Revolutionary War hero dude on his side. Revolutionary War dude says, "Hey, you get out of town because this shit's about to get real." This rebel Congress that they brought together that decided they're not going to put up with this. This is when they go into full open insurrection mode. They gather up about 600 or so people. The 600 or so people weren't all distillers. They weren't all farmers. Most of them weren't affected by the tax, but they were just kind of grouchy and grumpy. They gather up about half of those guys. They move to Bower Hill, where this tax collector dude is supposed to be chilling out. They surround the house. They demand that they release the dude, and the dude, the Revolution War dude, is the general. He's like, he's not here, guys. Screw off. And they start shooting, and he starts shooting back. Ceasefire's called so that they can discuss de-escalation. Mcfarlane was the guy who was leading up the rebels. And to be completely fair, the rebels had it in their mind, the insurrectionists, the rebels, whatever you want to call them, they had it in their mind that they were standing on the principles of the Revolution War, which just happened, mind you, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. This is 1794, so we're talking 8 years. 1776 is when it ended. We're talking 20 years. These are all Revolutionary War veterans. They thought they were standing on these principles of no local taxation, or no taxation without representation. If you're going to tax us, you're going to tax us locally, not at the federal level. But this was open defiance of the Constitution as it was set up and the roles and duties of the federal government versus, in order to operate and maintain and manage things. And they were in clear defiance of the law, clearly open defiance of the law and defiance of the federal central government. So the ceasefire is set. Mcfarlane, the guy who's heading up the rebels, he steps out, and somebody from Bower Hill shoots him, mortally wounds him, and he goes down. Well, needless to say, shit proceeds to hit the fan. The mob, the rebels, they burn the house down. Everybody in the house flees. I think a couple people died. I don't have my notes directly in front of me. I think a couple people died in the Battle of Bower Hill. It's uncertain because they didn't count the slaves that died, if the slaves died. But there was a lot of chaos. They burned all the houses down. And Western Pennsylvania at this point is in open fucking rebellion. They've got a small army, a very small army. We're talking 600 people, not a huge army, a very small, and it's not really an army. There's some Revolution War veterans. Mostly it's farmers. Rebels, insurrectionists, they're just not having it. George Washington calls up the militia from New Jersey, Virginia, in Pennsylvania, calls up the militia of 12,990 men and adds 10 federal soldiers to the group. So there's 10 federal soldiers. George Washington, a general below Washington, managing the whole thing. Alexander Hamilton is there in the party as a civilian observer, and he calls up the state's militias. And this is, again, what we were talking about last week. A militia. There's some kind of command and control with a militia. So when you call them up, you know who's coming and who's arriving. There's local divisions and whatever. They're volunteers. They get called up. And there was a lot of guys who did not want to join, who did not want to get called up. They had to be drafted. There was a lot of desertions. And this was not a very well-trained militia. This was not a very well-organized militia, but it was 13,000 men being called up from 3 different states converging on Philadelphia in order to march west into western Pennsylvania. Mcfarlane's reserve. Mcfarlane was the dude, the rebel dude. Yeah. That's the name of the guy. That is exactly the name. That's the guy that got shot. That was the rebel leader that got shot, if I recall. Let me double check that. Double check the name. I'm scrolling, I'm looking, double checking my name. I believe it was Mcfarlane who was the head of, yes, James Mcfarlane. He was the head of the rebels. He was the dude that got shot. So, there was a lot of desertion, a lot of guys that didn't want to be involved, a lot of guys that refused to be called up, a lot of guys who were deserters on this militia that got called up. And basically, they had to start drafting people out of the local, or to be in the local militias. Needless to say, they get 13,000 cats on their feet, marching with guns, heading west. The size of this army, walking from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh is a hike. It's a long hike. But here's what happens along the way. As they muster up the troops, as they head out and they start heading west, the size and scope of the approaching American army basically puts an end to the rebellion. Because here's why. You got 600 dudes who are mostly farmers. They're armed. It's not like they don't know what they're doing. But they don't want to pay their taxes. They're armed. They're angry. They don't want to pay their taxes. Versus 13,000 men with like generals and colonels and lieutenants and all the stuff, like chain of command. They're funded. They're fed. They're armed. They've got logistics, well, whatever logistics they have, but they're an organized army is marching at you. They shit their pants and quit. By the time the army had approached central Pennsylvania, Washington had bugged out and headed home. They did a tour through the area and checked out some infrastructure stuff, canals that were being built, things that were going on in central Pennsylvania as they were heading west. Eventually, the level of resistance that they're finding is not meeting the point of importance for George Washington to actually lead the army all the way west. So he bugs out and goes back to Philadelphia. Hamilton sticks around. The American general who is Henry Lee III, who had a really cool nickname, something Hammerin'. What was his nickname? God, come on! I should have written it down so I actually had it on my person. He led the army, but he didn't lead the army all the way there. He bugged out and went back home. Where is it? I don't have it. I don't have his name. Anyway, doesn't matter. He goes home. The American general's there. Alexander Hamilton's there. By the time they get to Pittsburgh, where the actual insurrection is taking place, All the rebels had basically evaporated. So this was a rebellion that literally got put down just because the federal government showed up. The federal government showed up in force, in mass, put the rebellion down. And now, also, mind you, the ability of the federal government to enforce the excise tax was very weak in the first part of this little rebellion that was going on from 1791 to 1792, 93. Their ability to actually enforce the tax was very suspect because they needed the people willing to do it, and they would replace tax collectors who would refuse to collect the tax. Um, the ability to actually go to the places and get them to pay the money. They needed to have the money, like all the distillers in Kentucky. They were untaxable for either purposes of resistance or simply lack of funds. Um, and they needed to be able to force the people, compel the people. I guess that's probably a better word for it. Compel the people to actually pay. So the ability of the government to do it required having personnel in place to be able to do it, and to house them and pay them and feed them and do all this stuff. When the army shows up, it pretty much puts this whole silly little rebellion in its place and puts it down completely. And that's the end of it. It was a significant moment because it was a decision. There was a progressive decision being made by the federal government to take steps to put this away and end this. And it could have been done. Well, I don't know if it could have reasonably been done without mustering up an army. This rebellion could have continued to grow, continue to expand, continue to spread into other counties. The eastern distillers could have said, if they're not paying it in the west, we're not paying it in the east. It could have put a bunch of distillers out of business if it kept going the way. They eventually adjusted the tax so that it was lower for the smaller distillers, but it still could have put these guys out of business. They still had to transport their whiskey from the east to the west because they didn't have access to transport methods or seaports along the Mississippi. This could have been a very critical juncture, or it was an extremely critical juncture in the history of the United States, but it could have gone much worse for the federal government if the federal government hadn't asserted its power and its ability. If it hadn't asserted its ability to demonstrate its power, let's put it that way. If it hadn't made a show of force, it could have changed the course of our country entirely. And the fact that the guy who signed the Constitution and was the first president, like shepherded the Constitution through the constitutional conventions, and led the army that actually defeated. The fact that that guy led the army, literally led the army, like physically. He's the only president ever to do this. The only time in the history of the United States that a president is ridden at the head of an army. The fact that he's the guy that led the army to put down the insurrection, even if he didn't go all the way. The fact that he was at the head of it, that added more clout. That added more gravitas to the whole situation. And had it gone the other way, had the rebellion been successful, had there not been a concerted effort to collect these funds to put down the rebellion, it could have very much signaled the end of a central government of the United States entirely. Because the revenue was not going to come in, the government was going to be starved of funds, and having missed the opportunity to assert its ability, it may never have gotten that opportunity to do it again. And what we don't learn in high school is how significant this thing was. It kind of gets glossed over, it gets hand waved over, but the reality is this was a big turning point. And I didn't realize how big a turning point it was because they don't teach this shit in school. But it was a fascinating episode in our history, a fascinating moment in time, and a really significant touch point in the history of our country. And it really shows the power of National Guards, the power of the the state militias, the power of the federal government to be able to say and do, if it actually makes a point to follow through on what it says it does, instead of letting things trickle on and dribble on and dribble on and dribble on for years and years and years and years and years. When you have an insurrection, when you have a group of rebels, when you have a group of people who just are refusing to abide by the laws, there's two ways to go about it. You can try to de-escalate the situation, which they kind of did for 2 years. They tried to de-escalate the situation, and then it shifted, and they decided to escalate the situation. Drag these people into court, enforce the damn law, put an end to this madness. And it ended up going badly, but then when they put it in, like really put it into the madness and brought in the 12,000, 13,000, it was 13,000 militiamen marching across the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, put it into that shit fast. And it's really hard to stand up when you've got a bunch of flintlock muskets and pitchforks. It's really hard to stand up with a bunch of flintlock muskets and pitchforks when 13,000, maybe not well trained, but definitely well organized soldiers are coming your way. It'll put the fear of something in you, whether it's the fear of God or the fear of something else. It'll definitely put the fear of something in you. But there you go. That's the Whiskey Rebellion. I don't want to harp on this too much longer. I don't want to keep going too much longer. We're at about 20 till by my watch. 23 minutes till the top of the hour. So it's just about time to move on to the next thing of the night, which is the whiskey giveaway. And then we'll spin the wheel, and then we'll move on to the oh shit, I just knocked over my drink. And then we will move on to the open chat forum part of the night. I can mop this up because I got a handy dandy towel. See, that's what happens when you put your drink by your mouse. I was reaching for my mouse and I knocked over my shot glass. That was dumb of me. But hey, good news. I've got more. Where's my bottle? There it is. I've got more. Where that came from. But I'm going to scroll through chat real quick, get caught up. We're going to start there, and then I'm going to shift back to the Wheel of Doom and Glory. So chat, there we are. There's my chat screen. Yo, Nick's in the house. And let's scroll up to where we started, shall we? Should be right about there. So Vanessa Kitty says, hi, ha. Yes, 1792 bourbon. Correct. Okay, where are we at? Put this over here. Come on. Okay. Scrolling, we're good. So Tara Smith's in the house. Tara Smith is on the wheel. Goddamn Bacon's on the wheel. McTubis, where's McTubis? Listen to episodes like this way better than. Oh yeah, I mean I love. I love the little historical side notes. Now, this could easily slide into the political side. Like it explains, it demonstrates militias and all that other fun stuff. But I'm not going to worry about that tonight. I've had my fun over on. Oops, just stopped recording. Don't want that to happen. I've had my fun over on TikTok today. It's surprising how butthurt people get when you tell them that a bunch of farmers are not an army. But that's a story for another day. Let's scroll, kids. Got a handle of Mcfarlane's. Yeah, we talked about that. Good. Hell of a March. Yes, it is. Actually, I understand March in Pennsylvania is actually quite chilly. Unlike March here. And hence I have a power of Bower Hill. Yes, Bower Hill. That is also Molasses flood in Boston. The Molasses flood in Boston is a great story because rum was still the principal alcohol in the United States up until the early 1800s. whiskey hadn't surpassed rum in the United States until, yeah, it was like I think it was the 1820s or so, when whiskey finally passed rum. So molasses stores all up and down the coast were not being used for sweeteners necessarily. It was definitely being used with um, was definitely being used for rum. Um, where is okay? This is just slowly scrolling is what's happening. Um, Congressional Superfund cleanup sites. Oh Jesus! Congressional Superfund cleanup sites. We've got several of those around Houston. They're great. They're a fucking trash fire. Literally a trash fire. Um, I mean, they're generally handled very poorly, but it's like the most frustrating thing because it's like just giant pollution pits. Uh, and they're giant pollution pits on the San Jacinto River here in Houston, at least. That's one of them. And it's like the literal definition of offloading the cost of doing business onto taxpayers. It's a great way for companies. Oh God, they're just a pain in the ass. You thought whiskey was created in California? No, California didn't even exist when. In fact, here's the really cool thing: the whiskey that was being made at the time of the Whiskey Rebellion wasn't even a defined spirit legally. It was just basically whatever they were making using cereal grains. It could have had, and it oftentimes did have sugar in it. It oftentimes had molasses as coloring. It oftentimes was had supplemental items in there for the fermentation process. The whiskey that was being made at the time wasn't legally defined in the United States. It wasn't legally defined anywhere. It wasn't legally defined until about the 1900s, the early 1900s, like 1908, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Silver alert. Oh, we should discuss congressional superfunds. A bunch of armed farmers are militia. Oh, that there. See, there's one of your TikTok trolls who found their way over to my show, and it's good for them. They've crossed over. They've crossed over platforms. No, a bunch of armed farmers is not a militia. A bunch of armed farmers are a bunch of armed farmers. A militia is not a bunch of armed farmers. A militia is organized. A militia has command and control. A militia has sometimes has funding, but they're definitely organized. They definitely have some command and control, and it's not just a bunch of dudes with guns. A bunch of dudes with guns is a mob, and even mobs have some kind of leadership. They have some kind of command and control. Nice try though, TikTok troll. Thanks for joining the party. I appreciate the. I appreciate you joining. I do. That's cool. Congressional Superfunds, drowning molasses. What a way! That is definitely a way to go. Superfund is money laundering. No, it's not. Not necessarily. It can be. It definitely can be. A lot of recipes are in my. There's a lot of recipes, especially from the early 1800s. A bunch of our grandparents, well, a bunch of my grandparents, probably y'all's great grandparents, uh, have recipes with molasses in them. They're fantastic. Uh, and hijabs for you. If I'm wrong about you being a TikTok troll, I'm sorry, but I'm guessing. Glad you joined us though. It's great to have new names in chat. It's great to see new folks joining me. And I hope you come back next week, or hell, I hope you come back tomorrow for trivia and pop in Friday for the live concert. But hey, definitely come back next week. I don't know what next week's topic will be, but it'll be something. Um, Present at the Mist Avery Superfund site in the Arctic. I don't know that. I'm the guy who rooted for the Empire in Star Wars. I am not the guy that rooted for the Empire in Star Wars. Uh, that's funny as hell. I'd like to take a time machine and go back in time to see how whiskey really tasted when it was first made. I don't. That's a that would be fascinating. Because there's a lot of uh, Well, I am glad you're not a TikTok. I'm a little disappointed you're not a TikTok troll because I was hoping a TikTok troll would come over and join me. Um, but I'm glad you're joining us. Debbie did 9/11. Uh, are you Debbie did 9/11? Are you the same person? Because Debbie did 9/11 is on the wheel. If you're Debbie did 9/11, then you're on the wheel. But I mean, either way, Debbie, if her name comes up on the wheel and you're Debbie did 9/11, then you get then y'all if you're all the same person, then y'all get the thing. So Shark Home Brewing taking a time machine back to see how whiskey really tastes. That would be interesting. Because there's been wine that's been recovered from the bottom of the Mediterranean. Uh, I don't know if that tasted good or not, but I don't know about the. I don't know about like whiskey shouldn't go bad if it was bottled up and you find an old bottle that's a couple hundred years old, whatever. It should taste the same way it tasted when it was put in the bottle. Um, and I wonder because like the processes weren't the same. I bet more craft distillers today. My guess would be that craft distilling today tastes more like whiskey tasted back then. Although you'd have a lot of variation in the whiskey from back then because there weren't like set protocols. Uh, Grain bills would be wide and varied. You know, you have oatmeal whiskeys and uh, just all kinds of different techniques and processes. That would be fascinating. That would be a fascinating little trip into the past. Um, let's see, what is it? Boston baked beans. What is that? Uh, Bacon hates me. Oh, Bacon hates you. Bacon. Bacon has an awesome mustache. Uh, and if Bacon hates you, you must be a good person. There's two types of great people: people Bacon hates and people that Bacon loves. So, um, if you're Debbie, you're on the wheel. Debbie is definitely on the wheel. She was one of the first people on the wheel because you were on trivia last week, if I recall, or 2 weeks ago. You were on trivia 2 weeks ago. Boston baked beans, a cookie with all spliced. There's a lot of molasses, a lot of cookie recipes that have molasses. Um, what were beer recipes in, like, say, Egypt? That's a good question. There were. We did a show with the history of alcohol. Maybe I'll do that again. Like the way alcohol spread from the Middle East up through Western Europe, because originally the distillation process was for making makeup and not for making actual alcohol. But at some point, the discovery was made that you could separate the alcohol from the fermented fruits and wines, and that was mostly used for medicinal purposes. But people learned you could drink it for fun too. So there you go. Wine and whiskey was recovered. Yes, indeed. Um, yeah, I mean, it was, the recipes were different back then. There wasn't a standard recipe for whiskeys. Um, anyway, um, what's the strangest ingredient ever used in a spirit? Strangest ingredient ever used in a spirit. See, that's a good question because fermented, there's fermented drink in every culture. Like fermented fruits, fermented wines, fermented drinks in every culture, and it's always local to whatever fruits are in those areas that's local to those cultures. Whether it's bananas or coconuts or papayas or whatever it is, it's there's a whole lot of stuff that's natural to it. It's always a sugary thing. If it's not something sugary, then it's not in a drink. It'd be it. I mean, the strangest thing would have to be some kind of a exotic fruit from some faraway Pacific island, I guess. Unless you're talking about something to transfer the yeast from its natural habitat to the whiskey itself. And that could be something like dung or feet, but it's not an ingredient. It's a item used to facilitate the fermentation. It's not necessarily an ingredient. It's like a paddle. It's an accessory to the process because that would come out. They wouldn't leave the dung in there. I would presume that would be gross. It'd give it off flavors and off colors or whatever. But that's a good question. That's something that I might read up on, see what I can find out. On we go. Well, if you showed up with a different name and you were hidden in chat, there's no way that I could find you. I mean, yeah, all right. Make me as well. But you are I'll put you on the list tonight. I will break a rule because I can make the rules. I'm going to add that name in there, specifically that one, because I am a benevolent overlord. What is it? HIJABSFORYOUNOTME. There you go. You're on it. There's 84 entries now, and I'm going to shuffle that. We're probably going to get some lagginess because the computer's working, but that's fine. A beer from South America that was made with chewed up ingredient and yeah, like that'd be a yeast transfer. That'd be a transfer of bacteria to convert yeast, very likely. Yeah, and whiskey recipe back in the day, pretty much all spirits back in the day is what do we have that will ferment? When did yeast start to be harvested, mass used in brewing and baking? That was around 1000 BC when they were actually being intentionally fermented and harvested. Fermented people, yeah. On a strange one, yes. Chiaca, come on. Chica. It's a corn beer from Peru that requires their women to chew the corn and spit it out to break it down. Yes. I've heard of that. I didn't know the name of it, but I've heard of it, where they chew the grains to break down the grains. They separate the husks out. That's not uncommon, especially everything spicy. Phil's in the house. Phil's on the wheel. Phil, it's good to see you here. You're on the wheel. We're about to be spinning the wheel. It's about that time. It's 12:54 according to my clock. Are we caught up with chat? Are we down? Judas Priest 666 has just subscribed and is now in chat. You know what? I added hijabs for you, not me, or for me, not you. I will add, who is that? Judas Priest 666. I will add them too. DAS. Come on. Judas Priest 666. I will add one more. And now we spin the wheel. We are ready. It is time. It is time. We have 85 slots on the wheel. 85 slots on the wheel. This is the wheel of doom and glory. We will be spinning it now. What are we spinning for? What are we spinning this wheel for? I will tell you what we're spinning this wheel for. This box right here. Into this box. In this box, you have joy and happiness. What we have is the first ever open. What we have here is the first ever full sample flight of our available whiskeys. We have our straight whiskey, special reserve, and double oak rye, along with a cigar right there, If you like them, you can smoke them. If you don't, don't. Toss it out. It's fine. It's yours to do with as you choose. We have a little information sheet for each one of our whiskeys telling you about the whiskey and its suggested retail price point, so you understand, the value of what it is that you're getting. Our double oak rye is made from 95% rye, 5% malted barley, aged in whiskey barrels for at least 2 years. Then additional wood is added to the barrel for anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks to supercharge the barrel flavor and give our whiskey a unique and distinctive flavor profile. Our straight whiskey is made from 90% corn and 10% malted barley, aged in used bourbon barrels for at least 5 years, bottled at 90 proof using Texas rainwater. And then our special reserve is 90% corn, 10% malted barley, made from our straight whiskey that's been put back in casks and aged a second time to deepen the flavor of the whiskey. And if you look at the whiskeys, you got to forgive the label a little bit. They got a little chewed up when I cut them. If you look at the color of our straight whiskey and special reserve, you can see the straight whiskey and special reserve. The straight whiskey is a little bit lighter in color. Let me see if I can get a good. Yeah, it's a little bit lighter in color because the reserve goes back into the barrel and gives it that little darker flavor. So this is the first time I've ever given away a sample flight, a little taste of all three of my whiskeys. Are we ready for the wheel? Can I get a hell yeah from the congregation? If you are ready for the wheel of doom and glory, say hell yeah in the congregation, and we will go ahead and spin this damn thing. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I give you at least one hell yeah somewhere. Whiskey's good. I enjoy watching your bottling. Thank you, Vanessa Kitty. I enjoy bottling. There we go. We got some hell yeahs from the congregation. So let's get this damn thing rolling. Roland, here's the wheel. Now, I'm only going to be able to spin it once. I mean, do y'all really want me to just spin the damn thing now? I mean, it's like... Okay, so here are the rules. Let me remind you of the rules. If the name comes up and they're not in chat, well, the name will come up and I will give it a minute and a half because there's the delay. You've got to see it. You've got to claim your gift. You've got to claim your prize in chat. You got to announce your presence. You got to say it's mine. You got to virtually do whatever you need to do to get my attention in chat. I will set my timer for a minute and a half. If you're not here, I remove all instances of your name from the wheel. You're gone. I mean, you don't hear this because you're not here. And then we spin it again. And we'll keep spinning it until whoever is on the wheel and in chat and says they're ready. What's that song spinning? The wheel in the sky keeps on turning, turning, blang, 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 blang. Yeah, that's a good one. I need to trim this down just a little bit. The wheel of doom and glory. There we go. And I need to move this up a little bit. I am stalling so bad just to cheese y'all off. Bourbon Ron is okay. All right. Everybody's had a chance to arrive. I've stalled this long enough. It is time to spin the wheel. Are we ready? Are we ready? You see, the thing about the wheel and spinning the wheel in this box, this is a very I'm just fucking with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and spin the wheel. With no further ado, the wheel spins. I think it spins clockwise. And 3, 2, 1, spin. Come on. Here we go. It is so laggy. Spinning wheel, spinning wheel, spinning wheel. Is that it? Shark Home Brewing. We just got a shit ton of lag going on. Shark Home Brewing, claim your prize. Pick up the white courtesy phone in the concourse. Stopwatch is beginning now. Did we go offline? We did not go offline, did we? No, we're not offline. Don't do that to me, McTubus. Shark Brewing is the winner. There you go. You have claimed your prize. Shark Brewing. All right. That's cool. That's cool. Shark, you win. And there's no way that I could put my thumb on the scale. This is a completely random. It's a website. I don't own it. I don't run it. I don't control it. Oops, wrong thing. Go away. Where's the there's chat. There's chat. Found it. My chat screen went away. I had to minimize it so that I could we had a circle of delay. Everything froze. It was my computer, I think. It just froze up. I'm looking at the frame rates that were being dropped there for a second. Shark, this is yours. Come on, open up. Shark, this is yours. So you'll have a little bit of information coming to you with regards to the bottles. You need to shoot me an email and let me know. The email is in the About section of my page. You shoot me an email, let me know how to get this to you, give me an address, and I will get it in the mail. I will UPS this out in the next few days. I'm going to hate to part with this. I enjoyed painting this and sanding it down and assembling the box. I enjoyed this. But now it must go on to somebody new. Cheers, Shark. If I'm going to be reading chat, I need to swap out my shades for my readers here. Oh, I didn't tell you guys. Check it out. I got my new package of Biohazards. These are the Biohazard Shades. So my old shades that I had since March of 2020 broke. And I contacted, I had Biohazard Shades. It was just a coincidence. I picked these up. I picked up my shades in Arizona at the very beginning of the pandemic. And at the time, it was just a pair of sunglasses. I just needed a pair of sunglasses. And it turns out that the brand was Biohazard, and I was wearing Biohazard sunglasses the entire time. He has access to original Californian whiskey. So I reach out to the company that does Biohazard optics, and they never responded to me. I'm like, I could wear your shades during the show. It'd be fine. They never respond to me. So I just ordered a box of them. And this came in the mail this week. So I've got orange, I've got green, I've got purple, I've got red, I've got another pair of red, and they have a little biohazard warning on them. I thought that was very appropriate for a podcast, for a show that started during the pandemic. For a channel that started content during the pandemic, I thought that was kind of a cool coincidence. So if you want a pair of my sunglasses, they're only $10. I'm happy to throw them in a bag and send them to you. $10. We can help. Hey, that can help pay for the lapel mic fund at the distillery. That'll be cool. I need to turn that light off too because it's going to blind me. We will use the wheel again sometime, Nick. That wheel will be done. I'll do it again at September. I think the beginning of September. And you can look and see. I'll make it bigger so y'all can see that. You can see there's names that are on here multiple times. Everybody's name who was in the drawing was entered in. This is the entries, all 85 of the entries. You can see the names are on here multiple times. Entries, come on. The names are on here multiple times. It's a cool little gizmo. There it is. See, there's SARS, there's Barbarella, Bacon, Great Shot, Ron, McTubus, Square Table, Solitude Surfer, Muscle Shell, Fishing Frenzy, Kentucky John, Nick, Steve. There's Bourbon Ron again. Most of these people are on here multiple times. Vanessa Kitty, several times there. Candy Scrapping. I'm glad that the first time I spun it, it landed on somebody who was in chat. That made me happy. That made me happy. So congrats, Shark. I'm glad you won. That makes me very, very happy. I'm looking forward to you trying our whiskey too. Let's get onto the chat screen. I'm looking forward to you trying our whiskey as well. I like to share the word and share the spirit. Let me tell you the story about the YouTube or the TikTok trolls today. It was a, I mean, it was a snarky dumbass comment. Uh, somebody made a comment on some video saying that the registered hunters in the United States would make something like the largest army in the world, something like that, something nonsensical like that. And it made me laugh because like registered hunters are not an army. Just, a bunch of hunters is not an army. They could be, don't get me wrong. A bunch of hunters can absolutely become an army. I mean, the army for the Republic of Texas when we were rebelling against Mexico was just a bunch of farmers with hunting rifles. I mean, that's all they were. That's all they started out as. They turned into an army. Sam Houston beat them into an army. They became an army. You could become an army. You're not just, if you and your hunting buddy sitting around with a 6-pack of Natty Light, y'all aren't an army. Not even close. So I laughed, and this shit blew up. It had 3,000 something views. It blew up. I'm busy working in the distillery. I go back and check my TikTok, and there's 60 comments on the video. I'm like, oh, this shit. What the hell did I do? And I check my email, because I'm at work and I check my email. I get a notification of Google. One of these ass clowns went over and reviewed my whiskey, said it was the worst whiskey he ever had, and he's a communist. I'm like, what the fuck am I a communist now? Because because hunters aren't an army, I'm a fucking communist? So hey, go to our go to our Google page and give us a review to counterbalance this dumbass. Give me a 1-star review because I'm a communist. Anyway, so how many registered hunters are there in the U.S.? Vanessa, there's probably 15 million registered hunters in the United States. There's a lot. There's a lot of registered hunters in the United States. Thank you, Shark, for sending the email. I appreciate that. No, they're not a militia. And they could become a militia. If they get organized and they get funded and they have a command and control structure, they could become a militia. And no, they're not an army, but they could become an army if they become organized and armed and equipped and trained. There's a difference between a mob and an army. A mob is not an army. And if you just got a bunch of dudes with a bunch of guns, that's not an army. That's a mob. That's a mob that is doing whatever the fuck mobs do. There's a long history in the South of mobs and doing specific things, but that's not an army. That's not even close to an army. Armies come in and put down mobs. Armies come in and assimilate mobs. They'll take the mob and they'll bring it in and they'll train them and make them become an army. But I mean, those are two different things. We're talking two entirely different things. So anyway, that was the drama that I accidentally got myself into on TikTok today. And I thought it was fairly innocent, but apparently there's a group of people that did they're finding this stuff out from TikTok. It's like the first time they're discovering that you and your hunting buddies aren't an army. Shocking, I know. An army defending us from an invasion of dove, maybe. But yes, Nick, I will be using the wheel again sometime very soon. We will likely start at the beginning of August this time to get even more names added to the wheel, so that we can do an even bigger spin. It's going to be fucking awesome. What else? What else we got? I'm scrolling back to see if we got any more juicy tidbits. The clacker, did it not have a sound effect? McTubis has to pee. McTubis, you crack me up. Um, yeah, see, that's the thing. Organization. Organization is the rub. And that's the difference between uh, a small operational cell, the mob, the organized crime families, the mob. They're not a mob. They're an organized crime family. Versus, just some dudes boosting purses and whatnot. There's organization to it. There's generals and lieutenants and colonels, and there's all up and down the line. There's organizational logistics, and some armies do it well, some armies do it poorly. Even in Ukraine, when they start calling up the National Guard and the citizen soldiers, those guys are getting training. They're not just running around with deer rifles. They're getting training. They have orders. They have places to go. They have funding. They have They have real weaponry. It's not just they're not just showing up with a pack of cigarettes and a 45. They're you just see showing he's got a bottle of vodka in his parka jacket, and he's got a bag of a pack of cigarettes and a handgun. He's like, where should I go? What you need me to do? That's my terrible Ukrainian accent. Did I show a? You see, here's the thing, Ron. I've been doing this long enough. I know when it's a fake review. Like there's people who can legitimately not like my whiskey. I get that. I take bad reviews of my whiskey. I don't have a problem with a bad review of my whiskey. You try it, you don't like it, fine. That's fine. That's fair. Whatever. But if you're from Cincinnati and you're like, I bought this and it was a drain pour and I'm gonna throw it, like, you're a fucking idiot. I know good and goddamn well it's not a drain pour. You're not fooling me. I don't know who you're fooling. I mean, maybe some other idiots who've never tried it, but like, this is great whiskey, this is great whiskey, this is great whiskey, drain pour. Glad I didn't spend money on it. It was a friend of mine. Like, come on. You're not fooling anybody. At least you're certainly not fooling me. So that's like the worst feedback. It's not scaring me. Do I see no difference between a militia and army? I see a big difference between a militia and an army. I see a big difference between militia and an army because mostly on a scale of discipline and, I mean, militia. I see a militia as almost like a like they're not full-time soldiers. They're full-time civilians that get. I see a militia almost as the equivalent of a drafted army. They're not volunteers. They're compelled into service. They can be volunteers. I mean, they can, because like in World War II, they had a draft and they had a shit ton of volunteers. But the difference being, they got. I mean, there was a significant amount of training that went into turning them into soldiers before they were deployed. And that's the difference between uh, an army and a militia. Militia doesn't have as much training as the army. There can be able-bodied soldiers that are called up, able-bodied citizens, if you will, that are called up and either commanded into service or uh, uh, they're either voluntold or volunteered, depending on how you look at it. And there's not a lot of training that's put into a militia, but there's organization that's given to a militia. You don't just call up the militia and say, "Go over there, guys." I mean, they're put under someone's command. They're given orders. Depending on how well that commander is, he drills them and turns them into a force, as opposed to just a mob. You don't call up uh, a militia and just put them in front of the cannons and let them go get shot down and gunned down. You organize them and send them like with specific goals and missions and do things with them under the command of a certain person. That's they're organized. And the difference between that and the army regulars is the level of training and the level of integration into the rest of the force. There's a difference. It's a subtle difference, but there's a difference. And there's a difference between an actual militia and just a bunch of guys sitting around a table, sitting around a campfire with their deer rifles. Well, yeah, we could definitely take that or whatever the fuck they talk about, whatever. I mean, I've sat around a campfire with a bunch of guys with hunting rifles before. We're not a fucking army. We're not a militia. We're just a bunch of guys sitting around a campfire. I mean, half of the guys, last time I was sitting around a campfire with a bunch of guys on a hunting trip, half of the guys had military experience, but that didn't make us a militia. We were not. We were a bunch of guys sitting around a campfire, talking, shooting the shit, drinking whiskey. We all have guns. We're not a militia. We could be, but that would take another level of organization, another level of coordination. I mean, there you go. You know, I know the Army advertised for a while that Army of One, but one person is not an army. I don't care how good Rambo is. One person is not an army. Oh, and Ron, I'll add, in addition to the most recent prizes that we've gotten, we have brought home fresh hardware from the New York International Spirits Competition. We got 2 silvers and a bronze. Silver, and bronze. Straight whiskey got the bronze. Special Reserve and Rye got silvers. So very excited about that. That's not a New York International Spirits Competition is not a small deal. Oh, Jesus Christ! I'm not even gonna dignify that with discussing it. Fed is losing staff. All cigarettes and the C rations I inspected had to be issued to the prisoners on base. Really? Accessory package initiative as well. Interesting. An army is an organized armed force, a standing army under the government. Militia comes to people outside. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, yeah. You know, the militia gets called up. They get drafted, impressed, volunteered or voluntold into service. But they generally, here's the difference between a militia and the rest of the army. The militia tends to stay together. They're separate from the regular army. Generally speaking, when the militia gets added, they're separate, and you can integrate them in, but generally they get called up. There's the militia forces, the regular forces. There's a reason that there's a designation between the two. Yeah, I mean, and my apologies for mistaking you for a TikTok. I really was hoping that we had somebody come over from TikTok. That would have been cool. And that's fine. You can disagree. Hey, rational, reasonable people can disagree. And usually it's a disagreement over semantics. There's a bug flying around in here, and it's beginning to piss me off because it's not a small one. Anyway, and like what Matthew was saying, a militia. The semantics of the issue. I mean, militia is not just. No, well, see, I'm going to disagree with that because there's a little bit more to a militia than just people who are like, fuck this. Because if you're like, fuck this, then the people who are demonstrating in the streets of Washington, D.C. were a militia. But y'all aren't like big fans of those people. So, when St. Louis, Ferguson was burning a few years back, that wasn't a militia. Just people who are pissed off and demonstrating in the streets is not a militia. There's a difference between a mob of people, and you can hide a militia inside of a mob of people. Hell, they did that in January 6th. There were like 3 militias operating on the steps of the Capitol inside of a mob of people, trying to organize the mob to get the mob to point them at a certain direction. That happens, but there's a difference between the two. They're not one and the same. A weekend does not make a military. A weekend, if you change the spelling of a weekend, it could make it into could turn that into a Would it be a pop group? um, that now, see, I also agree with that. That the militia does not. If it's an organized militia, there needs to be some kind of understanding of who it is. But a militia can form like that. It doesn't have to already exist for it to be called into action. Um, but there needs to be for the militia to be effective, the state has to be able to receive it. So there has to be some kind of structure into which it can go. Like we have a very well regulated militia in our National Guard forces. Um, Theoretically, we could add to those forces, but we'd have to have people in command and control positions. And if it came to that, shit has already hit a number of fans. So, I mean, that's so beyond the pale uh, to discuss that. But yeah, they don't necessarily need to be on a list to be called up. Uh, but if they're not on a list, if there's not a list of registered members of a specific militia, when you call up the militia, you don't know if they show up. You don't know if everybody's there. You don't know how many are going to show up. You don't know if you're calling up a militia, you got to know what you're calling. Otherwise, what are you doing? I mean, are you calling up one person? Are you calling up 1,000 people? Are you calling up 10,000 people? What do you do? How do you know? How do you know it even exists? But again, it could form on the day of. You could say, "Look, I'm commander." I mean, that's what uh, Davy Crockett did. He basically formed his little militia, the Tennessee Mountain Boys. Got a bunch of his friends together, and then he recruited from Tennessee all the way across to San Antonio. Went through Tennessee, Arkansas, Northeast Texas, all the way down into San Antonio. Recruited, I think, 50 something guys along the way. No, 30 guys along the way. So by the time he got to San Antonio, he shows up with a militia, a Tennessee militia of like 35 guys. Um, that's one way that militias exist and are brought into existence. They're not just necessarily, phone calls away. Um, Sat around a campfire. Yeah, I believe that, Vanessa. I'm sure you've sat around a campfire with active members of the military as well. Um, that is not how the Taliban. Hijabs for you, not me. That's not how the Taliban is organized. They are. They have a command structure. They are a full-on army. Yeah, they have operational cells that are dispersed, but they are a full-on army with generals and commanders and guys all the way down to the local level grunts. But they also have guys who are just members of the Taliban who aren't part of the command structure. Um, they got both, from what I understand. I'm not an expert in. Uh, no, safety doc, you didn't win. You weren't even here when we spun the wheel. Sorry, bud. Um, Nerve agents work wonders on bugs. Yes, they do. One of my favorite nerve agents that works on bugs is botulism. Uh, uh, Botulism toxin. The It is a powderized bacteria, powderized botulism bacteria. It has a brand name. You can buy it in stores. Bot what is it called? I have it in my garage. It works wonders. It is a full-on chemical bomb dropped in your garden. And what it does for the little bugs that it attacks is it basically paralyzes their uh, digestive system so they starve to death in the matter of 24 hours. And it gives me great joy to think when these little shitheads were eating my garden, that over the course of the next 24 hours, they were all starving, dying, painful starvation deaths. Um, so, safety doc, Vanessa, blah, 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 blah. There must be, yeah. I mean, you got to know how to shoot. It's not really that hard to shoot a gun, though. I mean, you got to know how to shoot a gun, but it's not really that hard, right? I mean, they're pretty intuitive. You point the pointy end at the other guy. I mean, for lack of a better description, I'll put my guns away. But you point the pointy end at the other. You have a handle on it, for God's sakes. It's hard to hold it backwards. Um, I mean, the very bad joke is that guns are so simple to use, even toddlers can use them because every once in a while a toddler shoots somebody or they shoot themselves. Uh, I I I gathered that about you, Vanessa. I thought you were retired U.S. something. I remember. I think I remembered you saying you were. I couldn't remember the branch, but you said you were retired military. Um, but yeah, being familiar with the arms of the militia, I don't think it's really that hard to learn. I mean, it's hard to learn how to shoot a gun straight because not everybody is a good aim. It's not intuitive, especially if you don't know which eye is dominant. I mean, for the longest time, I'm left eye dominant, but I'm right-handed. So for the longest time, I literally could not shoot straight because I was aiming with this eye because I have both my eyes open, so I was aiming slightly right of my target, where I need to physically close my left eye in order to aim straight. So for the longest time, I was a terrible shot until I learned that I was left eye dominant. So and yeah, when the average citizen in Ukraine was issued a rifle, I did not. I don't think anybody considers them to be. They're like, here, have a gun. That's not an army. You're you may be a soldier all of a sudden, but you're not a. I mean, in order to be considered, I think like here's a gun. Like, okay, what do you want me to do with this? Do what that guy says. Now, boom, you're militia because you have a commander, you have a leader, you have some command structure. And then there's a step beyond that where you get trained and you have uniforms and all the stuff. And I mean, it doesn't have to be regimented the same way it is in every country. It's different from country to country, but and from scale to scale. I mean, it could be uh, a ragtag group of soldiers who have been trained to be an army. You can train people to become a fighting force, and that's the difference between a mob and an army. I don't think this is particularly controversial. I don't think this is particularly hard to understand. It's They're not the same thing. That's why there's different terms for them. If they were all the same thing, they would just be called one thing. It would just be an army. That's it. They wouldn't have a designation defining an actual term defining one thing separate from another. It would just be the army. Who's the army? That guy. That's it. And that in most civilized worlds, that would be considered a joke. That guy's the army. That's not a fucking army. That's a dude. I mean, it might be their entire army, but like everybody would snicker about it. I don't see how this is particularly controversial, but I guess it is. Uh, Davy Crockett was the king of what? Was the king of the wild frontier. He was the king of the wild frontier. Davy Crockett killed him a bar when he was only 3. Oh, good Lord. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, I would not disagree. The National Guard is definitely an army, not a militia. Except we have an army. We have a standing army. If we didn't have a standing army, then the National Guard would be the army. But they're not the army, they're the National Guard. They're what stands as a state's militia. And the federal government doesn't control the National Guard, but the federal the National Guard is under the federal command and control. The National Guard is detached to the states. There's a difference between the federal army and the Texas National Guard. Those are two different things. And if they weren't two different things, they wouldn't have two different names, two different control structures, two different command structures, two different everythings. They're not the same thing. The National Guard is effectively our militia because they're not a full-time operation. They're not a full-time soldiery. There are full-time soldiers in the National Guard. There's a full-time command structure, but they're two separate things. And the Taliban is not structured the same way as our fighting forces are structured. They're an entirely different command structure. They're a different country. Form follows function and function follows form. So they're organized and structured very differently than how they're structured here. I mean, but effectively, for their purposes, the way they're structured, that's how their army is structured. It's looser than our army, but it is what it is. So there you go. And yeah, it's not necessarily a one-to-one proxy for the two. I mean, that would be like saying if a 4,000 square foot house in the United States is a single family home, then a 4,000 square foot chateau in France is also a single family home. Then a 4,000 square foot single family home in the United States is a chateau. And those two things aren't the same. Like the form and function of a French chateau is entirely different than a form and function of a single family home in the United States. They're not the same. Although a 4,000 square foot home in the United States is a fucking palatial mansion. That's big. That is nice. That's probably not a great analogy. But there's other analogies to be made, I suppose. I'm sure I can think of one. I just can't think of one right now. I'll fix that. Kill that. Brain cell off right there. Alec Bradley Cigar. That's right, Alec Bradley Cigar. This is what you missed out on, Safety Doc. Looky here. Da-da, 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 da-da. There it is. The Alec Bradley Cigar. 3 delicious sample bottles of whiskey. Let's move this guy. And a little info sheet for the 3 whiskeys that you're getting. A little bit of everything. Hey, let's all tell Safety Doc that his name came up first. I'm kidding, Safety Doc. Your name didn't come up at all. Shark Brewing came up. First name came up. It worked out great. The spinning wheel of doom and glory worked out great. What do we got next? You don't want to be spraying botulism toxin on. It's a powder. Just toss it around, and it actually washes out. I guess it's neutral. It only affects the little critters that eat it. I do not remember the canned Alaskan salmon recall from the early 80s. I was very young in the early 80s. Very, very young. It's an altered different type of there you go. It's an altered different type of botulism. That is correct. Where else we got? Injected box. That is, maybe it wasn't botulism. No, I'm pretty sure it's botulism. It was the botulism toxin. Yes, the USAF slogan did used to be aim high Air Force. Here's a fun piece of trivia that I learned this weekend. We rewatched Top Gun. And my oldest asked me, because they're in the opening scene, they're in the Indian Ocean. And my first, I'm watching this and I'm thinking to myself, as they're in the Indian Ocean, like, where the hell are these enemy jets coming from? Because the Russians didn't have fighter aircraft carriers. So they weren't Russian jets. The Indians, like India was right there in the Indian Ocean, hence the name. But they were the only ones able to project power into the Indian Ocean, and they weren't enemies. Like, where the fuck were these jets coming from? They were just two jets coming from the middle of nowhere, flying over the ocean. Where were they going to? What the fuck were they doing in the Indian Ocean? It didn't make any damn sense to me. All of a sudden, I'm watching Top Gun for the first time since 1986, 1987 probably, and it didn't make any sense. Like, where are these jets coming from? And then we go into the final scene, and it's 5 foreign jets, Su-28, Soviet jets, Su-28s, armed with French Exocet anti-tank or anti-ship missiles. Where the fuck are these guys coming from? Where are they going to? What are they doing? The Russians don't have aircraft carriers. Who the fuck is this? So I look up the movie notes. I dig around, I look it up. Turns out the original intent, the original writing was that this was supposed to be in the Pacific Ocean, and these jets were supposed to have been North Korean. Go figure. So that was the solution. The answer to that mystery was that it was supposed to be North Korean jets. My hunch is, I don't know if I could prove this. I don't know if I'll ever be able to prove it. And I know it's Navy, not Air Force, but still, there's airplanes. I don't know if I could ever prove this, but I think they probably moved it into the Indian Ocean so as to remove any possible notion that it was a conflict with a real country, that a real country's planes were being shot down, because there was like no possibility that it would be Russian or Indian or anybody else. There would be no possibility that any of our enemies were being shown in Top Gun to be shot down. That's my hunch. But I could never prove it. Army definition: organized military force equipped for fighting on land. Our Army does have pilots. Our Army's pilots serve in ground support, right? They're air support for ground forces. Our Army is not tasked with air superiority, though. That's the Air Force's job, is air superiority, right? Typically found or organized for a particular purpose. I think Muscle Shell is pulling Army definitions from dictionary.com. The true definition of Army, not militia. U.S. Army does not have pilots. That's USAF. I think the Army has pilots. I mean, aren't A-10s assigned to the U.S. Army? Doesn't the Army have helicopters? Aren't Apache's Army as well? I mean, for ground support, for close air support, I could be completely off base. Correct me if I'm wrong. Veterans, let me know. I was under the impression that both the U.S. Army and U.S. Marines had close air support. Both Marines had fixed wing and Army had fixed wing and rotary aircraft. Army, the rotor wing aircraft. I have no idea. Veterans want to serve 181 days or more on active duty. Also, those who are called to active duty have a present order of wartime for 90 days or longer are wartime vets. Army has ships. See, I know the Army has landing vessels, but they don't have blue water. Isn't that what they're called? Blue water ships for deep water, unless it's transports. Public health service officers. Okay, so if our Army has ships, so if our Army has jets and helicopters, are there not pilots that fly the jets and helicopters? Um, no, it was MiG 28s. It was MiG 28s in I think I said Su-20. It was MiG 28s in uh, Top Gun, and they weren't Russian pilots. They weren't Russians or Soviet. They weren't Russian pilots. They were distinctly not. They had little red stars, but they were not Soviet. Um, Dictionaries are important. Fishing vessels with the canneries on board were discovered defective canning of salmon. Dictionaries. A-10 War Dog. Yeah, those dope ass jets. They have the Burt guns. They fly over there. Burt. Army has pilots, flight surgeons. The U.S. Army. Okay, that's what I thought. So the A-10s are flown by the Air Force. Okay, so the A-10 close air support in their close or in their ground support roles are flown by the USAF. Okay, I really did think that the Army had A-10s, as did the Marines, for close air support. Shows what the fuck I know. Army flies rotary wing. Yeah, it's called the Air Force. Ranks fly aircraft. I would be surprised. Medical retired 16 years in 1996. Well, what else we got? They were in Top Gun. They were not Russian. They were not Russian. That's why we never heard them talk. Hey, cheers, Shark. Thank you for joining us. That's what I thought the Marines had A-10s. I thought there were ground forces that had A-10s. Chair force. U.S. Coast Guard does have pilots. In fact, I was talking about this with my kids. My youngest was surprised that it was the Navy in Top Gun flying F-14 Tomcats. He's like, "Why are they in the ocean? There's no bases in the ocean to fly planes from." Oh, and I explained to him, aircraft carriers have their big flying or floating cities and fortresses and all that stuff, and that all of the branches had some kind of air power that was able to be deployed. Even the Coast Guard had helicopters and fixed wing aircraft that would fly into storms and all the stuff that U.S. Coast Guard does some dope ass shit. Um, I think the only branch that doesn't have aircraft or any craft of any kind. Excuse me. Uh, oh, God. I think the only branch that doesn't have any aircraft of any kind would be Space Force, because I don't think they have anything yet. Are there space cadets in um, the Space Force? Are they populated yet? Are there actual? I don't know what the hell you call Space Force cadets. Cheers, hijabs. It was good seeing. It was good talking. I'm a little bit disappointed that you're not a TikTok troll, but I'm really glad that you came and joined us. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. Enjoy the show and all that shit. Um, and drink good whiskey. You never have an enemy around the table when you're drinking good whiskey. Everyone at my bar is a friend of mine, even if you're a crazy person. Because I can talk to crazy people as long as I put whiskey in them. They tend to make more sense, to be quite honest. And sometimes I do too. Uh, how many branches of the military are there? I think there's 6 officially, because it's Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard, Space Force. I think there's 6, officially 6. But I don't think there's anybody in the Space Force yet. I don't think there are any Space Forcians. I don't know what the fuck you would. They should be Space Marines. They really should be called Space Marines. They've always been called Space Marines. I've seen Independence Day. The Space Force has craft. We stole them from the aliens. That is awesome. Night, Debbie. It was a pleasure seeing you. Um, yeah, I know. Space Force was I think cleaved off, which makes sense. You know, we have enough hardware flying around the globe because it is a globe. It is not a flat disk. We have enough hardware flying around the globes, orbiting around the globe that uh, we should have a structure, an organized bureaucracy, a structured bureaucracy that thinks about protecting that all of the time. That should be its 24-hour job to put more stuff up there and protect the stuff we have up there. That should be its job. So it makes sense. It sounds like a joke to have the Space Force, but it makes sense. It's a smart thing to do. Um, I'm glad that the former guy listened to intelligent people who told him to do that. Fixed wing transports also flown by the Air Force. Yeah, I am not the person to answer that question. I don't know. Uh, Highest ranking enlisted female in Space Force. It is fully functional. Well, that's cool. I was not aware that Space Force was fully functional. I knew that they were uh, uh, ramping it up, but I did not know that they had a full structure. Uh, Space available is quite a fun way to fly around the world on military. Does anybody have access to that, Vanessa, or is it just military? Because I would be curious uh, how to fly standby, how to fly standby a military craft. That would be neat. Uh, National Guard is the seventh branch of the U.S. military. The National Guard isn't part of the U.S. military, though, is it? I mean, the National Guard is organized by the states. Huh. That's an interesting observation because the National Guard, there's an Air National Guard, a National Guard. There's at least two different types of National Guards, right? So would it be the seventh and eighth? I don't think National Guard is part of the U.S. military officially. Um, well, if K-Bar issued a knife for the Space Force, then I guess it's legit. Okay, so retired military members of public health. What about kids of military? I don't think probably not. That doesn't make any damn sense. Uh, Members of government can fly space bill. That makes sense as well. And I assume it's members of federal government, not members of local and state. Um, they literally pulled the Space Command structure and started new, then took volunteers. I think they do now have cadets, but might go through Air Force. That makes sense to go through Air Force boot camp because most of your uh, astronauts have been Air Force pilots or uh, experimental test pilots. That's the word I'm looking for. Test pilots. Um, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Let me close this screen here, prove a little performance, um, and look at this. We're doing a great job tonight. This is a good show. Looking at a couple stats here. So next week I'm going to post up my 11th episode of the quest for 100,000 views. Let me tell you how it's gone. Uh, yeah, I didn't think National Guard was one of the branches. That didn't make any damn sense. State-run entities under, yeah, they're state-run entities under the command structure, but not under the uh, direct authority of the federal government. So they can call them up into active national duty, but they are under this. I think the actual technical way of going about it is that the president calls the governor and tells the governor to call up or tells the governor uh, we need X number of National Guard troops or something to that effect. I think that's the way the actual process goes. The president doesn't call up the National Guard. The president calls the governor and says, activate the militia effectively, bring me the National Guard, and then the governor sends the National Guard into federal service. And the hand wavy shorthand is the president's called up the National Guard for service on flood control or blah 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 whatever, or service in the theater or whatever it is. They become under direct control through presidential. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But I don't think. I mean, I think the way the proper way for it to go is the president contacts the governor, and the governor activates them and sends them up to the feds. It doesn't. The president can't bypass the governor unless the governor is incapacitated for whatever reason, and there's no official. But there's some kind of legal structure through which they pass from the state into the federal DoD. And it's lazy shorthand English that they say the president calls up. Okay, so I guess I'm wrong. The president can bypass the governor? That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem right that the president can bypass the governor of the states. It certainly doesn't seem right that the governor would be able to say no. Like I think the governor's obligated to respond, but it doesn't seem right. I mean, I'll defer to your knowledge of the subject. If that's what you say, that's what you say. But it doesn't seem right. It seems like lazy shorthand. There you go. Okay, so I'm right. I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong about it. I'm clumsy with my language. Let's put it that way. The president writes the order directing the governor to activate the units and hand them over into DoD control. And it's the same type of lazy language that, when they say the Constitution grants us, the Constitution doesn't grant us shit. The Constitution prevents the federal government from taking shit from us. But it's the same kind of, the president has activated the National Guard. The president doesn't activate the National Guard. The president can order National Guard units to be sent into a theater, but the process by which that goes is Department of Defense to the governor to the Fed, and then the president now has access to the troops to send them toward. Because I know the National Guard was sent over to Iraq. I think the National Guard was sent into Iraq for both the first and second Gulf Wars. Because I know some guys who were National Guard forces who were sent over to Iraq. But the president can't order that directly. The National Guard has to be shifted into the presidential control and then deployed that way. Active service under presidential orders. Okay, I get that. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. I get that. They can nationalize it. They can say we're taking command of this group. And then I think the governor can say yes or no, but it doesn't matter at that point. The governor might as well say yes, because if the governor says no, they're going to do it anyway. Which makes sense as well. 7 official branches. National Guard is not a branch of the U.S. military. 7 branches. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force. No, 6. I'm wrong. 6. That's right. 6. 6. If you do your entire military in the National Guard and never under presidential orders, you're not considered a veteran of the military. Oh, that is very interesting. That is very. It also makes sense. It also makes directing governors of the units be activated, but presidential orders to active service under presidential orders that trumps whatever the governor do or don't do. Right. The governors don't get a chance to say no. The governors can't say. The governors can say no, but it carries no power. So they might as well. I mean, they could. I could envision a dickhead governor telling a president no when the National Guard was activated. In fact, I could absolutely see Abbott doing some shit like that. Having the National Guard get called up for federal duty and Greg Abbott going, "No, we're not going to send our National Guard." And then like the president having to force it to happen. Cuz Greg Abbott's a piece of shit. To whom is being called up to? Really? National Guard is the only army required by the Constitution. The National Guard being the state militias, that the states would maintain a militia. That is an interesting factotum there. The National Guard is the only army required by the Constitution. Huh. I gotta find another cool little historical thing to dig up. A little historical corner of our country to flick at and pull up, like the Whiskey Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion was a cool little story. But that's an interesting fact that the National Guard is the only army required by the Constitution, that the states maintain a militia. The president could call up one person or many. How fucking weird would that be if the president wrote an executive order calling up Mike? Just that's it. We're activating Mike. Mike needs to report for duty on the National Mall on June 14th, 2022. Get your ass up here, Mike. I seem to remember, Vanessa, a lot of soldiers, sailors, airmen, a lot of military personnel not being allowed to retire during, I think it was Bush the second, with the Iraq and Afghanistan deployments, that they weren't being allowed to go. Their deployment was being extended, and they were being added into additional rotations. They weren't being allowed to retire, and folks who were retired were being called back up. But again, that was 15 years ago. I don't remember so good things that happened in my 20s. So, yeah, the president can do a lot of things. But what the president doesn't typically do is give direct orders to divisions. He gives broad orders that get handed down to the generals and then get executed down the line, which is different right now than what's going on in Ukraine with Russia, where Putin is actually giving specific instructions, which is so fucked up on so many levels that he's like bypassing his command structure and just like going straight to the commanders on the ground and saying, "Do this, do that." It is insane. Muscle Shell, that is a good question. How many likes do we have on the video? Just 2? Fuck you guys. Hit the thumbs up, man. What is wrong with you assholes? Hit the damn button. Eat my butt. I've been doing this for 2 hours. We gave away 3 samples of whiskey and a fucking cigar, and y'all are just like not gonna eat it. Jesus. I'm gonna end the damn stream and close this whole stupid thing out. show y'all. I'm kidding. I'm not going to end it. But that's okay. I don't do it for y'all's benefit. I do it for mine. I'm entertaining myself. What was that? You I personally saw a retired colonel back on active duty in the early 80s. Wait, whoa, hang on. Time out. Are you saying you were active duty in the early 80s? You're a retired Air Force. You're a retired Soviet era Air Force. God damn. All right. I didn't part of the Superfund processing back to activity. He was out for like 30 years. I knocked my drink over again. Son of a bitch. I have now spilled as many drinks as I've consumed. Can't take me anywhere nice. So you were active duty in the early 80s. That had to have been a hell of a time. That had to have been a hell of a time. I need to buy you like several drinks and ply your mind for all of your like stories from the early 80s because that sounds fucking fascinating. Did you know in the early 80s our B-52 Christmas tree units were scrambled off to Panama? B-52 Christmas tree units were scrambled off to Panama in the early 80s. Why the hell would okay, first, what's a Christmas tree unit? And two, why would they be scrambled off to Panama? What are you talking about? That would be funny. Like activate the entire unit except for you, Mike. You're a fuck up. You're not allowed to. That would be choice. Like, okay, we're gonna go off to war. We're gonna go occupy this Chili's on 34th Street, but not you, Mike, because you're an asshole. We don't want to eat Chili's with you. Avoiding the metallics. What are you talking about, McTubus? Burn into the ground. They're the alert nuclear bombers that sent in a Christmas tree form. Oh, okay. Why would they be sent off to Panama, though? Yeah, I know. I'm spilling shit. I'm just terrible. Introduced in 1980, basically, is 60 years old. 60 years old, Vanessa. Bravo. Brava. Six jobs is very political. I'm reading Scrambled Christmas Tree, Mike. I'm old enough to get that reference. Not sure I should be proud of that or not. Thank you. They're the alert nuclear bombers that fly in a Christmas tree formation, awaiting for or sit in a Christmas tree formation. Okay. All right. Well, why Panama? Why? I do remember like the B-2 program being revealed during our bombing of Panama under the original Bush. Why did we scramble bombers over? Why did we scramble the bombers over Panama? I don't know why. That's what I want to know. Why did we scramble the unit over Panama in the early 80s? Cuba? No, Cuba had stuff pointed at us in the 60s. Okay, so that's related to the shit going on with Panama back in the mid 80s, early 90s. I got that. Okay. That makes sense. I get the context. I get it now. But Noriega and all that shit going on with Panama as it came to a head in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, what were we going to bomb Noriega? That doesn't. Hmm. I mean, we sent bombers down to Panama in the late 80s, 88, 89, 90, 90, 91. That's when it was, I think. Um, oh, okay, I got you. Okay. I got you. Noriega was dicking around with the canal. I got it. That makes sense. That's kind of why we had to arrest him. But I find that to be so wild that we arrested him on drug charges, brought him back to the United States, tried him, and he's in jail. Like Manuel Noriega is in jail, or is he still in jail? I don't know. I can't remember if he's still in jail, but he was in jail for a good long time. And I find that to be wild. We went and arrested a head of state with the Marines. uh yeah, that's just dope as hell. Um, and the fact Uh, you never hear that. No, you don't ever hear that. That the fact that we scrambled B-52s to Panama in the early '80s is that's that. I mean, I'm this many years old learning that. That's a it's a thing that happened, but it's a thing that happened that you don't think about in the history. But I'm sure we scramble B-52 bombers more often than we know, like we, the civilian general population, know. I'm sure, especially in the 1980s, I'm sure that happened more often uh, than we were told about. You know, we learn an awful lot after the fact of how close we came to nuclear Armageddon in the 80s, and how it was like two times one dude stopped all shit from breaking loose. Um, I remember back in '86, still doing the duck and cover drills in elementary school. Um, I don't ever remember doing an active shooter drill, but I definitely remember doing duck and cover drills. I remember in fifth grade. Yeah, I live just outside of Houston, so I remember in fifth grade having the discussion with my classmates, fellow 10-year-olds, about what would happen in the event of a nuclear war, and all of us just basically coming to the conclusion, yeah, we're basically gonna die. A discussion as a 10-year-old, just casually just accepting the fact that in the event of a nuclear war, we're probably gonna die, and just shrugging our shoulders and then going on and playing cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians. We still played cowboys and Indians occasionally in the mid 80s. How fucked up is that, right? Um, do I know what's buried on base at Barksdale Air Force Base in the woods? I'm guessing several hookers, several dead hookers. Uh, at least I hope they're dead. They're buried. Uh, yeah, my that's my guess, and I'm also going to guess that that's not wrong, but it's probably not the answer you were looking for. Several dead hookers, both male and female. I know the answer to this one, Bacon. They were called the Christmas Tree Squadron because that is the shape of that's the shape they made while they were parked. They made a little Christmas tree shape, and they would fly and they would take off in the Christmas tree shape. I know the answer to that one. But no, other than dead hookers, I have no idea what's buried in the woods at Barksdale Air Force Base. No earthly idea. Uh, but it is after midnight. It is, God, I don't want to wrap this up, but I mean, we kind of got to wrap it up. A certain aircraft carrying nuclear weapons crashed and you just buried it? I mean, that's not funny, but that's fucking hilarious at the same time. It's like, oh my God, y'all did what? But at the same time, it's like, of course that's what they did. Y'all just like a jet carrying nuclear missiles crashes to the earth, and y'all are just like, just like kicking dirt on it, like you're a you're a dog that just took a shit, or a cat just walking over and just pawing the litter on top of your crap, and you're just like, yeah, there's nothing. There's nothing there. Don't mind me. Oh Lord, he just buried it. B-52s were at the secure section on base. Overhead, they what looks like a Christmas tree shape. See, I knew that one. Um, I want to wrap this up. That's what she said. I don't know, Bacon, with the change in laws that we're getting. Certainly in the state of Texas, you know, back in the 90s when I was a kid, the mantra was wear a condom every single time. That was Trojan's ad campaign for a while. Every single time. So I think that'll be coming back. If they're going to keep making it hard for women to do what women need to do, their bodily autonomy. Wrap that willy every single time. That's going to be the new mantra. Trojan's going to start advertising again. Who owns Trojan now? Is it the Unilever Corporation? Hey Siri, who owns Trojan condoms?
Okay, I found this on the web for who owns Trojan condoms. Check it out.
Church and Dwight. Oh, dude, snap! Check it out. I am so right about this. According to Market Watch, Trojan parent Church and Dwight, which is a weird name for a company, expects revived sales of condoms and dry shampoo. That's a weird combo. In 2021, as people get closer again. Oh, that has nothing to do with the change in laws. That just has to do with people coming out of COVID pandemic. COVID pandemic lockdown and starting fucking again. Okay. Church and Dwight. Is that like a investment firm? Church and Dwight Inc. CHD down 188% is the parent company. They own Arm & Hammer detergent and Nair hair removal cream, along with Batiste dry shampoo. Interesting. One of them is dry shampoo, where we have seen categories decline due to store closures and not browsing in stores, said Britta Baumgart, Chief Marketing Officer for Church and Dwight, on the latest earnings call, according to FactSet transcript. An even more eagerly awaited bounce back of sales is in the condom category, as condoms mean pleasure. 18 to 24-year-olds can't wait. 18 to 24-year-olds can't wait to get their social lives back. And with college campuses reopening, 2021 looks promising, she said, because kids are going to start fucking again. That is awesome. That is awesome. The pandemic drove double-digit consumption growth in many domestic categories, especially gummy vitamins, pregnancy test kits, and baking soda. Baking soda? Why baking soda? Why baking soda? I wonder. Okay, anyway, back to chat. Sorry, guys. I got sidetracked by rubbers. But for real, go hit the like button. I'm not doing this for nothing. Disney owns Trojan. Disney doesn't own Trojans. Okay, those jets take off seconds of each other. When you hear them take off, you feel out of your. I believe it. There are a great many diseases you never want to catch. Exactly. That was why. That was the campaign in the 90s. It had nothing to do with babies. It had everything to do with AIDS. In the early 90s, it had everything to do with AIDS. Like, you don't want to catch this shit. I remember when I moved into the dorms at U of H, they had a residence meeting a presentation downstairs, and I thought that was a great way to go down and meet some chicks. It was an AIDS presentation. I was like, wow, fuck this. I'm already there. But they were given the presentation, and this is how they did stuff in the 1990s with the AIDS presentations. it was just a regular looking person like you, me, like everybody else. And she's giving her presentation about AIDS and the disease and what it does to your immune system. And she finishes it up with, and you can never be sure who has it. It's not just, it's not people who look like they have a disease. It could be anybody sitting in this room right now, or even me giving you this presentation. And that was like when all of us were like, oh, it's like normal people can have AIDS. Holy shit. I don't think Magic Johnson had come out with the AIDS announcement yet at that point, and that nailed it for us. We were all like, "Yeah, we're gonna wear condoms all the time, like always." They had free ones at the clinic. They on campus. You could get them at the health and wellness center. Yeah, and it was like literally you had them all the time, every single time you wrapped your junk. Which was so weird. Like during the pandemic, when they were like, "You need to wear a mask all the time," we're like, "We wore condoms to lunch in the 1990s." Like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? Like, most of us weren't going to get AIDS because most of us weren't fucking anyway. But we wore condoms. We always had one with us. Always had one in our wallet. Always had one on our person all the time. All the time. And then, flash forward 25 years, and they're like, I don't want to inconvenience myself. Like, we inconvenience the shit out of ourselves. Anyway, whatever. That was a thing. Turn it inside out and throw it in. That is the most disgusting thing, Mr. Nick. I remember being, what was that? Able to remember 1492 because it was 1980. What? Being able to remember 1492 because it was 1982. My first memories are of a preacher complaining about a divorced man running for president. Huh. Yeah, we always forget about how even though he courted the evangelical right, he was a divorcee working on a second marriage to a woman who was deeply involved with astrology and other stuff that evangelicals don't tend to look uh, kindly upon. Close to $1,000 per auto injector. Oh, I know what kind of medicine that is. That is a anyway. Troches, rubber ducky, AIDS, and monkeypox. Y'all are on fire tonight. What is Humira? What was 6K for a month? 4 shots. Jesus Christ. Plan B pills. They didn't have Plan B pills back in the 90s. That's a pick one up for a consumer along with baby wipes. Plan B pills and baby wipes. I guess they learned their lesson on the first one. What year was that one? I first went to Brooks Air Force San Antonio in 82 for briefings and trainings on AIDS. That was our present. My college years was 1993 to 1998. 93 to 98, yeah. 36K. See, this is the shit that I don't get. Why we're okay with paying private insurance. We like don't want to pay 1% on our taxes, but we're okay with paying like 5% of our or 10% of our disposable income. This shit doesn't make any sense. And insurance companies aren't losing money. So clearly we should be able to run an insurance company on the government level. Or the national level at least. A quasi private public corporate like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, a corporation that's backed by the federal government. We should be able to do that. Of course, it would put like 6 insurance companies out of business, but if private insurance is so great, they should be able to compete with nationalized insurance just fine. I remember a situation about 3 years ago. First new drug in 22 years. Ah, that sucks. It sucks. All hope and excitement coming in with a new drug that fails you. That sucks. But hopefully, uh, hopefully the next one will work out better. Or I mean, you still use the old one that costs so damn much, but hopefully the next one will work out better. Um, 1792 bourbon is called what it is because it was the start of the Whiskey Rebellion, or the second year of the Whiskey Rebellion. It was part of the Whiskey Rebellion. All those years wearing condoms to lunch, and you end up catching the kids anyway. Yeah, I mean, see, when we were in school, getting pregnant wasn't the issue that we were worried about. It was the thing we were worried about was catching actual diseases. Um, Catching a case of the kids, catching a case of the kids wasn't an issue until many, many years later, when we were, actively trying to avoid having kids when we got married, and then a few years after that, actively trying to get kids after we had decided we wanted some. But we could make that decision. When we wanted to have kids, we decided it was time to have kids, and we had kids. Dragon blood from a tree in South America. Okay. Medicare, TRICARE for life insurance. Yep. Situation. Well, you're also 60. In your 60s. So you have access to medical, and you're a veteran, and you're in your 60s. So you have access to medical care and Medicare and medical care that I do not have access to. As a kid of a soldier, I don't have access to that stuff. You use VA almost exclusively deductible and still gets meds on my wife's plan fairly quickly. My wife is a teacher, so our teacher insurance, her teacher insurance is good for her and the kids. It sucks for me. STD interviews on active duty. Oh, you interviewed the ones who got sick, so you had to ask them about their syphilis cases. Where does it itch? How bad does it itch? When does it itch? Oh, I bet you got stories. um, I bet you got all the stories. Oh yeah. All right, we're gonna give this we'll give it another 30 minutes. I'm wrapping it up at 1 o'clock. We're gonna wrap it up at 1 o'clock and send it back to wherever the hell else it's going. But let's do it. Let me give me 1 moment for a little bit of housekeeping, real quick. Tomorrow night, trivia night. We've got 35 boozy bucks on the line. Friday, we've got music. We have Sedona. Let me go back to my main cam scene. Sedona Night. Where is it? Is that the one? No, that's not the one. That's the one. Boom! Friday Night Live with Sedona Night tomorrow night, or Friday night. Our doors open at 6. The music will start at 7. The live stream will start sometime between 6 and 7. So you get a chance to get in on that. It'll be a good time for all. 30 minutes, plenty of time for more shots. Yes, McTubas, plenty of time for more shots. 3 people flown in quarantine from Korea to Elmdorf. Took 3 months for them to pass from. Holy crap! So I'm reading this. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking flown in quarantine from Korea to Elmdorf. I'm thinking COVID. Because we're on the tail end of the pandemic. You were already retired when COVID started. Obviously, took 3 months for them to pass from then gonorrhea. Like holy shit, they passed from untreatable gonorrhea. Damn, I didn't know gonorrhea was fatal. I didn't know there was such a thing as untreatable gonorrhea. That is fucked up. I did not know that there was I didn't know that there was a penis disease that could kill you other than AIDS. I thought they were all just nuisances. I mean, like eventually syphilis would kill you, because it would get to you. But like all the others, I thought would just pass. Like what is it? Chlamydia. There's the big 4: syphilis, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and AIDS. And I only thought that gonorrhea or AIDS was the fatal one. Syphilis could be fatal if if left untreated, but it could be treated and didn't have to be fatal. And then the other two, the clap and gonorrhea, would just pass. I didn't think they were all that gonorrhea could be fatal. That's fucked up. 14 and pregnant was common. Nothing else to do. Graduating class had 28 people in it. Huffman, right? Many married to get out of home. Yeah. I mean, we think that the 80s was a long time ago. And like conceptually speaking, it was only 40 years ago. But all known antibodies, safe sex is extremely important. Yes, indeed. We think the 80s was a long time ago. Even the early 90s was a long time. But like culturally speaking, they were a long time ago. You watch shows in the 90s or from the 90s and how they were all, all the heebie-jeebies about being gay and being called gay and all this stuff. Like that seems so distant, culturally distant from today, right? But in the 80s, there were like, just think of this. When was the last time the idea of somebody who was illiterate, who could not read, was a thing? Like in your mind, like the last time you were aware of functional illiteracy, people who cannot read. And I'm not talking about dyslexics or people who have like a condition that prevents them from being able to comprehend I mean full on people who just didn't know how to read. They grew up in an era when it wasn't necessary. That was the 80s. For me, that was the 1980s. When you had people that grew up, they were born in the 40s. They never went into the military. They were born in the 40s. When they were 13, 14 years old, they decided they were working on a farm. They were working in whatever rural Texas or wherever they were. They came into the town. They were a janitor. They had some kind of what we called back then menial labor. They were a janitor or even a mechanic or something or something like that. They just never learned how to read. They never had to. I mean, I can't imagine that being the case today. Most people on Twitter are functionally illiterate. That's not untrue. Uh, but that was like a big deal in the 80s. There were still literacy campaigns that were like a big deal. Like we learned about them. We raised money for them. We saw them on TV. Um, literacy campaigns on as public service announcements on TV. Like that was a big fucking deal. And yeah, I know illiteracy exists in our society today, but it's a vanishingly small sliver of the population. It's not like it was. I think in the 80s it was as many as 5% or 10% of Americans were functionally illiterate. In the 1980s, that's not a small amount of America that's functionally illiterate. In the 1980s. That's a vanishingly small number now. It's like less than 5% now. It's like almost nothing. It's not nothing, but it's almost nothing. Uh, and like Tara said, women, kids, girls marrying off at 14, going getting pregnant and going to living in with their uh, live-in boyfriends at 15, 14, 15, 16 years old, going off to get married, child brides. That was I mean, we had a whole group of girls in my high school. I remember this. They left and took a semester off to go have their baby. The same way that they did it in my mom's school in the 1950s and 1960s, where they would go and uh, not go to school for a semester and they would just go off and have their baby. They would be gone for a semester and then come back and they looked tired and their hair was a little bedraggled, but they were They were back in school the next semester, just like that. They would just go off and have a baby. That was a thing in the 80s still. In my high school, that was a thing in the 80s. And I'm guessing in Tara's high school across the river here, uh, which there's Humble, which is a suburban community, and then Huffman, which is a more rural community than Humble, but we're kind of in the same area. And then further east, there's more industrial, but it's still very rural. And um, 47 souls support groups in the okay. I got a functional illiterates. Sadly, I made sure I never got my bore. Wait, what? You're bore punched. What? Uh, okay. Ever have the Roto-Rooter swab for STD testing? I think that means when you, right? Whew. um, yeah, and Vanessa, I think you're right about that. The kids who grow up now to be functionally illiterate, they had learning disabilities as kids. They're dyslexic or whatever. Generally, it's dyslexia, but there's other learning disabilities, and they basically are functionally illiterate as an adult. But that's a small sliver of the population as opposed to what it was as recently as the 80s. We're talking 40 years ago, as recently as the 80s. When it wasn't people with disabilities, some of them were people with disabilities, some of them with learning disabilities, some of them mental uh, uh, disabilities, but they were just normal guys, normal people that were just fully functioning members of society that just never learned how to read. It wasn't that big of a deal in the 50s, 60s, 70s, up into the 80s. It just wasn't that big of a deal. They didn't have to learn how to read. Um, yeah, I figured that out, Nate. I figured that out. uh, yeah, Bacon. Yeah, exactly. People start a family. You hit puberty. You get married. You're 13, 14 years old. Teen sex wasn't a big deal because you were married. Teen pregnancy wasn't a big deal because you were married. Till death do us part wasn't a big deal because you got married when you were 13. You died when you were 27. It wasn't that big of a deal. There were two types of people. They were very young and very old. Not a whole lot in between. Um, that is that's a fact of life from back in the day. Um, okay, you live in Huffman was the town I was thinking of because you described Huffman to a T, um, and that's why I thought about Huffman. But yeah, that's where my lovely wife is from. And I dated a couple of girls from Huffman too. Uh, they were fun people to know. And the evening parties, the bonfire parties, were just dope as hell. Um, a long swab for COVID test, but goes in your pee pee. You guys are on fire tonight. Um, much like which were speaking of chlamydia, gonorrhea. You guys are on fire tonight. It's great. And while I mention it, don't forget to hit the like button. Oh, most of you have. It is 8. I'm gonna hit it too. I think it counts if I do it. We're up to 8. I appreciate that. Thank you for your support. Thank you for supporting the stream. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for being here and engaging. I know you do live in Huffman now, Tara. And by the way, if you're in town on Friday, come check out Sonoma Night. You'd be my guest. I'll buy you a drink. Um, high school is 5 miles east. Okay, so I'm curious, what is the farthest distance from home? You don't count Vanessa because you were in the Air Force. I'm sure you traveled all around the world. What's the farthest distance from home you've traveled for leisure, for pleasure? Not for work, for pleasure. What is the longest distance you've traveled from home for pleasure. Me personally, the longest trip that I've taken from home, it was a road trip. It was like a 3,500-mile road trip. We went up to, we went up through Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota, into Wyoming, then went back through South Dakota into Iowa, cut back into Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. Did we go into Arkansas on that trip? No, we skipped Arkansas, Oklahoma, down into Texas, and back home. It was a 3,500-mile road trip. New York, New York City, Tokyo, Beijing, and back. That only counts if it was for pleasure, Nate. That doesn't count if it was for work. But that was our longest road trip. And it was amazing because, we stopped along the way and we met people and we talked to strangers, and it was just fascinating taking that trip for pleasure. Actually, I wonder if our cruise to Belize was farther than that. The cruise to Belize was almost certainly farther than that, but it doesn't count because it was a cruise. If there's dancing at the there can be dancing at the concert. If you want to dance, you can dance. But you don't have to. It's not required. 7 days, April 85, Anchorage to DFW. That's fucking awesome. Texas, California to Washington back. Tara. Tara's going to absolutely have the record on this one because you drive all over the country. We have a trip planned. An epic land cruise from Houston up to Washington, down the coastal highway, and back into Houston. You played baseball at 11-year-olds in Beijing? What is that, a baseball at 11-year-old in Beijing? Was it like a little league thing? You flew out there and did a little league thing? That sounds cool as fuck, man. Cool as fuck. Anyway, but we've also gone up the Appalachian, not the Appalachian, part of the Appalachian Trail, but we've gone up the what the fuck is it called? The highway, the Natchez Trace Parkway. We've gone up that and back down, which was Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, Arkansas, and Texas, which was a fucking epic trip. Absolutely amazing. Gorgeous. I don't like taking road trips west because that's mostly Texas. And it's kind of like, you drive an entire 2 days in Texas, unless you go north through Amarillo, and then you can get out of Texas fairly quickly. I really like taking road trips north and east because you get out of town. You get out of town, you get out of the state. You get to see the country. We've done a trip, a motorcycle accident. Wow, damn. That sucks. Friendship tournament back in 1988. Supposed to go back next year, but Tiananmen Square. Oh yeah, that would be a cool little glimpse into history. The Tiananmen Square. Maybe I'll rebrand this from philosophy to history, where history and science meet whiskey. But we got some shit for the James Webb Space Telescope we got to check out. Because that's some dope ass shit that's going on right now. Connecticut, Florida, back DFW in 7 days. 7 days? Why would you do that on purpose? That's not a road trip. Doing 5,600 miles in 96 hours isn't a road trip. That's a cannonball run. That's no fun. See, our road trips, when we do our road trips, we go maybe 250 miles a day. Maybe. We'll go about 100 or so miles. We'll do something in the morning, go 100 or so miles, 100, 150 miles, stop somewhere cool, eat lunch, see a thing, then load back up, go another couple hundred miles, 150 or so miles, stop in a cool place, eat dinner, spend the night, get up in the morning, do a cool thing, load up and take off. So, if we go 2,500 miles on a road trip, that's going to take us 10 days. Because we go slow on the road. We stop with all kinds of side trips, and every giant ball of string we stop and take a picture at. Yeah, I know you've been around the world. You travel everywhere. You're a fucking road warrior. You're amazing. Longest distance nonstop. Now, see, I'm not impressed with. I mean, that's fucking cool. Longest distance nonstops: Inglewood, California, to Lakewood, Washington. What's the longest trips? Auburn, Washington to Reno, Nevada. Inglewood, Reno. Oh yeah, that sounds awesome. I would like to take. I would like to do the Smokey and the Bandit trip. Go from Atlanta to Texarkana and back to Atlanta, but take the Smokey and the Bandit route. Not go the freeways, not go the highways, not go the interstates. The short route. I want to take the long route where you you go down to Georgia and then you backtrack a ways and then you come back up to Atlanta as you go through all of Georgia. That would be cool as hell. Um, that would be fun. And yes, that would be eastbound and down, 100%. Um, yeah, trips with that is usually how I do my road trips. My lovely wife is the planner for road trips. If we have a road trip, she's planned it. She's got an itinerary. She's got places to go, side trips to do. We plan our destinations based on we plan our destinations and the route. So most of the time you show up at a place after everything is closed, right? So we usually plan our destination for it to be a place that has something to do in the morning so we can get up and do the thing. And most of the time the thing that we do in the morning is going to be a hike or a national park or a state park or something like that, so we can get up early, we can do it, get on the road and get the fuck out of there. And it's free, which is also dope as hell because it's free and you don't have to spend money, and you can do it twice if you really want to. And then lunchtime is usually at a cool little bistro or a city park or something neat like near a museum where we can kind of stretch our legs and unwind from the trip or whatever. And then the evening, like I said, we find a nice place to crash. Uh, 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 yeah, most of the time it's at a KOA. When we're doing our trips, we'll stop at a KOA, which is almost always off the beaten path. You stop at the KOA, you get in there, and you do. I'm going to bring the camera down just a little bit so I can lean back and chill. You stop at the KOA, and we do our stuff, and then uh, we move on uh, to the next stop. KOAs are usually off the beaten path and not far from national parks and state parks, so we can go from the KOA to a cool little park or do a little hike at the KOA. Longest drive was Clarksville, Tennessee to Camp Pendleton, California, nonstop. Woo! Crazy. Nonstop. That's insane. You guys are road warriors. Our first road trip started off as like a nonstop cannonball run from Houston to Flagstaff to go visit a aunt and uncle of ours. But we stopped at this little town we were driving. We just crossed into New Mexico, and there was an exit sign that said, uh, Paleontology Museum, next exit. Or Dinosaur Museum, next exit. That's what it was. And we see the sign, and I look at my wife and go, we got to go check out the fucking dinosaurs. And I peel off the freeway, and we go check out the Dinosaur Museum. And it was the coolest little community college dinosaur museum I'd ever seen. Because, New Mexico, it has all the dinosaur stuff. And the community colleges have cool little paleontology and archaeology programs. So they had this cool little dinosaur museum. And that's when I told my wife, we're going to stop and do one of these things every single day for the rest of this trip. And we ended up getting to my aunt and uncle's house a day later than we planned to because we were just like stopping off and doing all this cool shit. And from that point forward, all of our road trips have these cool little side diversions on every single day of the trip. And um, it's just, it's a cool way to travel. The difference between being in a plane and being on a car is you can always stop the car and go just check out something that looks neat on the side of the road, take dumb pictures with dumb stuff and do, dumb touristy stuff. You can do that in a car. You can't do that in an airplane. You can't do it on a bus. You can see the stuff you're passing on a bus, but you can't stop when you're on a bus. You can't stop when you're on the train. You can't stop and do any of that stuff. But when you're in a car, you can say, historical marker right there. Let's go. And you take a right turn, go check out whatever the fucking historical marker was. It's just really, really cool. And on our last trip that we went through, we were on, where the hell were we? We went and checked out this cool little historic town. There was a historic town. The church had been there for 200 years. It was this cool little town. And as we're driving through it, I guarantee this is an old slave settlement, a freed slave settlement. This used to be that, because it just had this look about it. It uh, had this cool little vibe uh, of this like town that time had forgotten. And I think we were in North Texas somewhere. And we're driving through and finally find the historical marker, and it shows the historical marker for the church. And we're reading through the historical marker, and it says, this is a town that was established in 1860 or 72 or something like that, 1875, somewhere in that neighborhood. But it had been settled prior to that by slaves who had worked the land around the area, and then when the freed slaves established a town, and this church had been attended by slaves since the 18. It just had this vibe. It had this vibe that it was a town that the time had forgotten, and there was something about it. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but it was just a cool little vibe to the town. And you see enough of this, especially in the South, especially in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, where we travel a lot. You see this a lot where it's like these little towns that almost look like settlements that just the rest of the world has passed on, but these people have lived here. They've owned their houses. They've owned the property. They've been in the family for the last, everybody there, 65, 75 years old. They've owned the land. They're second, third generation people who've lived there that own the land. And it's just like, it has a vibe. It has a look about them. And it's just cool being able to see that history and touch that history and be a part of that history. And if you get really lucky, you get to actually talk to the people who've lived there all their life, and they can tell you how everything's changed and how everything's stayed the same, and how they've been able to watch the world around their little town change. It's just absolutely fascinating. Um, okay, I'm seeing chicken. Someone hit a chicken. Hang on. uh, Vanessa hit a chicken. What? Can't get away with coast to coast anymore. Electronic. Uh, we hit a chicken trying to cross I-81 Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at midnight. Okay. Yeah, I believe that, Tara. The technology. I would love to talk to you about some of the technology they have on those trucks, and how it's going to change in the next 15 years. But That's a whole nother discussion. Good night, Nick. Pleasure seeing you on the show. Thanks for joining us. We will see you hopefully tomorrow night for trivia, if not next weekend or next week, or for Friday night for the music. Like the damaged feather and shit everywhere. We have a pop-up tent, a rooftop tent that we used to have on my wife's van. I haven't put it on our new van yet, but being able to pull into a campsite, clip the latches on the tent, pop the tent up, pull the floor out, and in the course of like 15 minutes being ready for bed. The KOA is a nice option because it's nice and it's always clean, it's always safe, it's always secure. But just being able to stop on the side of the road, pop the tent up and sleep, going to a rest area or a state park or a scenic overlook place where you can just stop and yet you can have a little bit of privacy for 6 hours and get some rest. That is fantastic. I absolutely love our little pop-up tent. I love that little rooftop tent. And I am looking forward to getting it back on our car. It is a great level, especially if you're just spending the night overnight. It's not a great way to travel if you're going to a place and spending 2 or 3 nights. Because if you have to pack up and go somewhere, you have to leave the park or go somewhere, you have to literally pack up the tent and get everything stowed and then leave and then come back and set up your camp again. That sucks. But having a rooftop tent, I love having my tent attached to my car. Don't care got late. uh, well, yeah, I mean, you can camp in the truck now. And that's basically the same thing we have with our van. We have the rooftop tent, so we're basically camping. I mean, it's not in the van, obviously. We have to stop and open it up and climb up there. But the first and only time that we've taken an RV trip across the country was just an absolutely spiritual experience. I absolutely loved it. We went Houston to Savannah and back. We went I-10 out and I-20 back, and it was a great trip. So both halves of Mississippi and Alabama. We saw all of Georgia from south all the way around to the coast and all the way back up to the north. Went through South Louisiana and North Louisiana. It was a fantastic trip. Absolutely loved it. Pulled in my house like 3. Woke up at 9/11. Yeah, now gas. I mean, Jesus Christ, we're talking gas is $4.25 here in Houston. I don't even know what it is in California. It's probably got to be $5 in California. I mean, it's getting crazy. Something's got to give real soon. Maybe a windfall tax would be nice to see to bring gas prices back down so that we don't have to. Unlikely. It's highly unlikely to happen, but it would be nice to see it happen. All right, guys. It is 12:54. It is time to hit it. There's still 10 people in chat. So I appreciate, like I said, I appreciate the support. Hit like if you don't mind. I would appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed, now would be a good time to do so. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss trivia tomorrow night. So you won't miss our live music on Friday night. Try to cross the road into Nuggets. Filling up a Camaro last time. Premium $76. Holy Jesus. Whew. That's rich. True story. Worked at a company full of structural steel engineers, employees, and clients. 9/11 happened. Guess. The bridge had a huge chunk of surface missing. In my way to the beginning of the bridge, a swerve trailer axle ripped off. Yeesh. Yeesh. Hey, I appreciate it, Judas Priest. Thanks so much. Like I said, I don't know what the topic will be next week. Usually something will strike my fancy over the course of the weekend, and I'll set up a show for Wednesday. I don't have any ideas. I'll find some other interesting historical event to talk about. Something to talk about, some kind of cool historical event that we can tip it off, that tee it up on, and then we'll go from there. I don't know what it'll be yet, but I'm sure something will strike my fancy. Uh, I'll scroll through some of the funner uh, the funner and obscure parts of our American history and see what I can find. There's a whole lot of parts about American history that aren't fun to explore, though. That the deeper you dig, the more you find out it's just some kind of shit, and it's not fun to. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, but it's like you learn about an event, and then you pick at it a little bit, and you pick at it a little bit, and then you find out, oh fuck, it's just racist. There's a whole lot of that stuff. Um, the Whiskey Rebellion wasn't one of those events. That was not that big of a deal as far as race relations goes. But there's a whole lot of, especially down here in the South, when we find out about something that happened, and you're like, that's weird, and you pick at it, you're like, oh man, that's no fun. But there's plenty of other really cool things that we can dig around and find out. And maybe next week is the time that I should do the history of whiskey 101, or the history of alcohols, because we can trace the movement of distilled alcoholic beverages from Egypt through Mesopotamia and through Eastern Europe and into Western Europe and up into Scotland, Britain, Scotland, and Ireland, over the course of about 1,500 years. So maybe that not even 15, more like 900 years, over the course of 900 years, going from Mesopotamia up into England and Scotland. That'd be fun. That'd be fun to revisit that. Maybe look at the history of cats, not the musical, the actual animals. We'll see. I'm not sure. I'll think about it. I got like 5 more days to give it some thought and think about it and see what we come up with. Maybe I should just like turn off my camera and let y'all keep chatting. uh, you retire military, you're always available for recall. Yeah, that's um, it coded me out. There's got to be a point where you're too old to be recalled, so like the mandatory retirement age. Because I know there was a mandatory retirement age for my dad as a federal police officer. There was a mandatory retirement age. And because there's a mandatory retirement age, there's a maximum age at which you can be hired to be a federal police officer. So like, I think the age is 35 because the minimum mandatory was 55, which is stupid because the minimum mandatory is not the mandatory. The mandatory was like 65, I think, for this federal police force. You had to retire when you were 65, I think is what it was. But they didn't want to hire you after the age 35, I think, because the maximum retirement age was 65. And they didn't want you to have less than 35 years of service. God, I don't remember what the deal was. I cannot remember. I'll have to look into that some other time. Anyway, guys, the Panama Crisis. You're a special being brought in as a special advisor. Of course, you're not active duty. You're a special advisor. Of course, of course, of course. Voluntold. Anyway, all right, guys. I'm going to cut this. We got to be done. I gotta go to bed. I got work in the morning. I know y'all are retired and just retired military and all that shit. Y'all don't have stuff to do tomorrow. I have shit to do tomorrow. I've got 8 cases of whiskey that I need to box up tomorrow. Friday, we've got Sedona Night playing at the distillery. Um, and sometime over the course of the weekend, I'm going to record my 11th episode of our quest for 100,000 views. It'll probably be a quick little 5-minute video, 5-10 minute video. But in the meantime, until I see you tomorrow night for trivia, just like live your best life. Be awesome to each other. Think with your whole brain, love with your whole heart, drink good whiskey, and be awesome to each other. Till tomorrow night, cheers, guys. Be awesome. Auf Wiedersehen. Good night.